Coffee and Cream with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Pitch. Breaking ball hit in the air. Deep right center field up the alley. This ball is going to be gone. It just clears over the out-of-town scoreboard. And Bryce Harper with his 11th home run of the season. It's a 2-run shot. And the Phillies are in front. It's 2-1. The 3-2, swinging a high fly ball left field. Way back in left. Gone.
He did it again.
Got another curveball, and for the second time tonight, he did not miss. Here's the set and the pitch. He sends a drive. High, deep to right. That's back, track, wall, gone. How about that?
Swinging a high fly ball. Deep left field. Jones back to the track. At the wall. Gone! The first homer in the major leagues for Oslevis Basabe is a grand slam. And it caps a 9-run eighth.
You know, I haven't checked Major League Baseball's scoreboard lately because all I ever see are L's in the Cardinals column. So I just have decided not to look at
Major League Baseball
scores. That's correct. I just decided not to. And so as those highlights were going, I was kind of just scrolling through like, oh, I wonder who won that game. And I'm like, oh, yeah, must be nice for the Dodgers to win again. Like, oh, must be nice for that team to win again. Yeah, no, the Cardinals lost again. And you know what's funny is Wainwright was on the bump. And I asked this question to DB last week. Wainwright is only 2 wins away from career number 200. That's how we got on that list when you showed up that day for your podcast of the amount of pitchers that are, you know, in the top 10 of career wins, active pitchers right now. Wainwright is 2 away. He has since lost to the Oakland A's.
Not great.
And the Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm sorry, the Royals and the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think he still has the A's on the docket.
Still not great.
Does he get to 200 knowing that he only has roughly, let's just say 4 starts left? Does he win 2 out of 4 down the stretch? Are the baseball gods on Wainwright's side, or is he going to finish his career below 200?
God, his numbers are bad this year.
They are not
like really
not
bad.
Great.
Man, I gotta say no. I mean, his ERA is almost 9. His whip is almost 2.
Shane, I don't need to hear it, buddy. I don't need to hear it.
His whip is almost 2. I don't see it unless he, you know, is able to push the sun back up into the sky for a.
You think he could?
I
think
no,
Wainwright could?
I really
see that guy.
I don't.
He did sing the national anthem this year on opening day.
I mean, he's 41, and Father Time seems to have won this battle. I don't see it happening.
All right. Well, we'll keep everybody in the loop because I'm sure all of Husker Nation, all of Blue Jay Nation, all of Maverick Nation are overly curious as to what happens to Adam Wainwright down the stretch of this season.
You know, it's kind of a bummer for him because he's got 3 seasons in his 30s where he starts less than 10 games or 10 games or less. It's like that probably was the spot you needed to pick up your 2.
Yeah, but I mean, give the Cardinals credit. They gave him every opportunity to win games. I mean, Pirates.
He's got 17 starts this year, and he probably shouldn't be pitching anymore.
Yeah.
Like, let's be real.
I mean,
here.
what they should have done, and what can you really think? I mean, you're playing the Royals. Like, yeah, you'll probably start Wainwright against the Royals. The Cardinals scored 8 runs that day, but let's just be real. Wainwright did not pitch well that game either.
No.
You know what? Did he make it 1 inning against the Royals? Is that what it was? Yeah, he went 1 inning, 9 hits, 8 runs. Yeah, like that's not going to do it against the Royals.
That's the thing. Like, I just don't know if he's even going to make it the 5 innings to qualify for a win. Like, that's the even if they end up winning the game, like that's the tricky part is he's getting shelled so badly early that like it's almost if you're ahead after 5 and he's in the game, you almost have to pull him immediately so there's even a shot that he gets a win. And I just don't know that that's going to happen.
Well, the only two teams that I think you could really snag a win against down the stretch of the season would be the Pirates again.
Yeah.
Which they have a 3-game series in September. And maybe a game against the Reds. Like, that's like all I'm really thinking about right now with Waino. 2 divisional opponents, guys you've seen a lot.
Yeah, Cincinnati's like in the hunt, though.
They are in the hunt, but
So
because they're in the division, it's
Yeah.
not like the Orioles or the Phillies.
There's some familiarity there.
I don't really want to play the Brewers because they're atop the division.
Yeah.
And right now he's lined up to go against Blake Snell Monday, August 28th. Not feeling
I
too
don't like your
confident in that
chances
one.
there, bud.
So, you know what?
The Reds are
I'm
probably
leaning no. I'm leaning no right now, guys.
You're right. The Reds are probably his second best opportunity, but
No.
I still don't think that's a great shot. I mean, the Pirates are the Pirates are right there with St. Louis in terms of record. They're out of the hunt, so they're probably not going super hard in terms of like scratching and clawing to win games down the stretch here. Where Cincinnati, they're a half game out of the wild card. They probably are. Like they're gonna. I find it highly unlikely unless something just weird happens, right? That's gonna be tough. I don't think he's gonna get there.
Now, speaking of the Reds, Nick Kinnaman chimes in on YouTube. 8 days, go Big Red. 8 days away
I'm excited.
from the college football season here in Nebraska. Did you know there were games this weekend? Like college football week 0 games?
because it's you got the week 0 games,
You
right?
got some action going on.
Love some action.
You have a couple of SEC teams. I know Vandy plays at least, and the funny reason why I know this is yesterday I stopped by with the Boys Down Bad, Boys Down Bad podcast.
Yeah.
I went down to Lincoln, hung out with the guys, and just a really good group of guys. Definitely relatable to me because they're degenerates too.
Sure, yeah.
So they have a segment that they put together, and it was pretty similar to my Build a Parlay segment from my former sports betting podcast, where everybody just gives a play and then they make a parlay and they see if it hits. Well, I was confident coming in with my Hawaii pick.
Okay.
I was going with Hawaii plus 17.5 against Vandy. Doesn't seem like something that anybody would want to back, but if I tell you this, it probably would, right? Vandy at home since 2021 is 0-6 against non-con opponents to open the year. That gave me every inkling to say, I'm going to go with Hawaii. And then my guy Jordan to my right went before me and goes, I think I'm going to take Vandy.
Oh, okay.
And I go, no. So I had to change my pick, and I didn't really do a lot of prep for this weekend. I had my one pick, and I'm like, all right, I'm good. Didn't think anything really. I didn't think anybody would pick Hawaii.
Sure.
Well, turns out they pick Hawaii a lot on that show, at least to open the year. So I should have done my research on the Boys Down Bad podcast.
Sure.
Versus just my week 0 research. So he went with Vandy. I'm not going to fade. I'm not a fader. So I'm going to ride. I'm going to ride and die with the Vandy pick. But I changed my pick to Ohio. I went with a little Maction. Ohio money line. And they take on San Diego State. So we'll see. We'll see how that parlay turns out. I didn't do any research on Ohio. I had somebody that I knew play football there. Like went to college there and played football. So I was like, all right, I'll just ride with Ohio for that reason.
Did you get
really sure.
Did you get a little plus action on the Bobcats there?
Plus 125.
There you go. All right.
I think that's what we locked in as.
Yeah, I mean, there's Navy Notre Dame is kind of a fun game for the opening weekend for week 0. That's not bad. There's not a lot to. I mean, this is a pretty sicko weekend, if we're being honest here.
It's not great, but you know what? Those hungry for some college football will be attached to the couch cushion and eyes on the television.
Thank God the Pac-12 network's going out with a bang, going San Jose State USC in week 0.
Huge win for
I
them.
mean,
we have the over in that game as a part of that parlay.
I'd probably watch that game if it weren't on the Pac-12 network, but I guess I'll be watching Hawaii and Vanderbilt instead.
I'll be keeping a close eye on that too, because if Hawaii covers, because it was Vandy to cover at, I think, 18.
I've got it at 17 here, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's at 18.
I wouldn't hate 17.
Actually, 17 and a half. It's at 17 and a half.
Well, maybe we buy down to 17. I think that was
maybe by the half
think that
point.
was discussed.
There you go.
But yeah, that'll be a game I watch. The Ohio game, I'll definitely watch. USC, I'll check out because USC is, a top what are they?
Yeah,
Top
they're
10 team
6.
in the nation.
Yeah, there's. I listen. I'm interested in USC. I just don't have the Pac-12 network, and I'm not gonna find it for.
Oh, you're not gonna go buy it. You're not gonna go get Apple TV so that you can watch the Pac-12.
I've got Apple TV, but I think this is specifically on the Pac-12 network.
That would make sense.
So
just go to a bar.
Yeah,
that game's gonna air at 11. What time does that game?
No, that game starts at 7.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Wait, a West Coast game starts at 7.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's an afternoon start in the West Coast.
Yeah, just go to a bar.
Yeah,
that's prime dinner time.
Yeah, that's probably. Well, it's a little early for me.
And you guys go out. Like, that's all you guys do. That is too early
It's a
for
little
you.
early
You are at a Pac-12 schedule. I was texting Ravi last night, and we were just discussing a few things, and then I wanted to call you and fill you in on something. And you're like, hey, man, I'm at dinner. And I look at my clock.
It was like 8. It was 8:30.
Dude, it's like 8:40. And I'm like, wait a second, you're at dinner. And you're like, yeah, I'll call you when I'm done. And you didn't call me till like after 9.
Yeah, it was like 9:15 when I called.
Bro, that's not dinner. That's dessert.
No, I like to eat late. Well, so a lot of times my wife gets done with work around 7-ish. So we usually don't get out till at least 7:30. And then, yeah, it was a little later yesterday. Just, I like to eat a little bit later too, because otherwise I get snacky before I go to bed. Okay. And I'm trying not to get snacky before I go to bed. And so if I can wait for dinner a little bit longer, then I'm not hungry going to bed. It's a little better situation for me.
Yeah, you know what, man? Like, you go to bed early. Like, let me just tell you that right now. You go to bed early.
Yeah, so I was actually in bed.
Eating dinner at 8:45 and you going to bed at 10? That I don't think you're going to ever fall into the trap of being hungry, even if you had dinner at 7.
Well, that's probably true. But if I have it much before 7, I do get snacky. So,
okay.
And yeah, I went to bed about 10:30 last night. So, but yeah, I don't know. We're late eaters. We like to go out to eat. I don't know. We go out to eat a lot.
Now, Jacksonville State UTEP is also on there. David Erickson on YouTube asks, is Smothers starting at Jacksonville State? I believe he is backup.
Ooh, yeah, I'm not sure.
I believe he's the backup for that
Let's
team.
do a little Google real quick.
I'll be completely honest. I have not been following along with Jacksonville State's camp.
Yeah, I have.
So I don't know if Smothers is emerging. Maybe you have some details on that. You can fill me in. But as of right now, I think the last depth chart that I looked at, he was backing up the redshirt senior that's there.
So all I've got is some things that are saying Logan Smothers is emerging.
Okay. So there it is. I asked if somebody knew if he was emerging.
Yeah. So I don't know if he's going to actually start or not, but
all right, I'm going to look up the depth chart.
He appears to be at least in the hunt.
So the 2023 Jacksonville State depth chart shows Zion Webb currently as the starter, redshirt senior. Wow, yeah. I'm good. But I don't know what's going on in Jacksonville.
Yeah, the
I don't know what's going on.
A lot of those depth charts is they're sort of just educated guessing, especially this time of the year.
I don't know.
And especially at a place like Jacksonville State, where I imagine they have a bit less media scrutiny than Nebraska does. And we don't even totally know the depth chart at Nebraska yet, right? I mean, we do for quarterback, but there's a lot of spots that are still kind of up in the air. So that's probably an educated guess and probably a decent guess, but it wouldn't shock me if that changes.
I would love to see it.
Yeah, it'd be terrific.
Week 0, give me another game to watch.
For sure.
Let's see a little Smothers action.
I like to root for the guys that end up leaving Nebraska most of the time, unless, they do it under weird circumstances. But for the most part, these guys that just either couldn't get through like a log jam at the position or it just wasn't a good fit for him, typically wish him the best. He never got any indication that he was anything but a good kid. And, you hope that he has a successful career and finds kind of the experience he's looking for out of college football,
Yeah. So yesterday, this also had me thinking, when DB showed up, we were going to do the Sports Six Pack, never ended up doing that.
Yeah, we did
because
not
he
get
presented us with a way to like really listen, right? From our perspective, because we talk a lot, but how often do we listen from other fans out there? And Like think, okay, how do you perceive this
Sure.
bit of information? And so when I was on the podcast with the boys last night, they asked me about my expectation or preseason expectation of the matchup against Minnesota, the week 1 matchup against Minnesota. And I started talking through it a little bit, and I gave my piece of how I think that, they are at a little bit of an advantage because because Minnesota doesn't have a lot of detail on what they're actually going to see. But I said at the same time, Nebraska's at a disadvantage because we haven't seen this team play yet. Like we haven't seen them on the football field.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of in that like state of mind where I would probably take Nebraska to cover in this game, but I don't know if I'd have them all out winning. Like I'd give them the 7.5 points, but I don't know if I feel confident enough yet to say like, hey, they're going to win this game.
Yeah, because we don't know what Nebraska's going to look like either. Is the other thing, right?
Yeah, because I just don't know when they step onto the field, are we going to get everything that Coach Rule has been talking about, or
is it still a work in progress?
Yeah, is our growing pains going to show? So.
There's definitely going to be growing pains, right? It's just what are they? How dramatic are they?
So we're talking about these expectations, and it's funny because after I was done, you kind of had like a few of the guys chime in, and then it just seemed like unanimously after some deliberation, many in the room just sighed and said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like that I don't know feeling all around. Because isn't it funny, no matter how much you talk about the matchup, the way it all ends up, the thing that fans settle on is, I don't know. Like there's so many ways this game could go. 7.5 is a lot of points. But as we talked about body language yesterday and reading the body language of the staff, feeling whether it's positively or negatively about what the staff and players were saying this offseason, if it can change expectation, that conversation last night had me thinking long and hard on the I don't know. And we just really won't know until we just see the product on the field.
I don't know.
Yeah, I really think it's I don't know is the right answer, to be fair. I may have, like we talked about with DB yesterday, my feeling of it being 6-6 or 7-5, and I think I said 7-5, was part of that is I don't think it's that hard to win 6 games in college football. I just really don't. And so
with how things are scheduled.
Yeah, with you've got some non-conference schedules. The Big Ten West is not a juggernaut. Obviously, there's winnable games there, especially with Northwestern this year. That's a game you have to get. Purdue's in transition. That's a game you probably need to get. And all of a sudden, if you only win your non-con and those 2 games, you're at 5. Okay, so.
And then what's the swing game? Is
the
swing game
so
Iowa? Is the swing game Minnesota?
Got 1 or 2 games to get, or you've got 7 games to get 1 or 2, right? And as much as I like Illinois, they're not a juggernaut. As much as Iowa has been really solid as a program. Obviously, Nebraska beat them last year, so that's not an unwinnable game. And Iowa's almost never scary looking, right? Like they are.
And
always,
Maryland has a scary quarterback,
but the rest of the roster.
What else does that look?
Yeah,
like?
The rest of the roster is kind of. Even Wisconsin, who a lot of people like, is still a team in flux, right? They're installing a new offense. They've got a new head coach. They've got a new quarterback. Like they're a team that is in transition as well. So you look at all these teams in the West, and you're telling me they can't get, 1 or 2 more games out of that? Like I just, it doesn't seem that hard to me, especially, and I use this example all the time, like Lovie Smith fell his way into 6 wins at Illinois. Like he accidentally won 6 games at Illinois. That man didn't
accidentally win that game last year to give the Bears the number 1 pick, though.
He went
not. For 2.
He did not. That man did not want to be in college football. He had no interest in being at Illinois. He was just cashing a paycheck. And my dude still accidentally won 6 games in the Big Ten West. Like it is not climbing Mount Everest to win 6 games. And I think because of what we've experienced in Nebraska the last 6 years, all of a sudden making a bowl game seems like this huge accomplishment. And at this point, it's great progress for the program, but it is not that hard. Let's not talk ourselves into it is this Herculean effort to win 6 games and make a bowl game. That's part of why I think if you have a functional coaching staff it's very doable.
Bless you.
Whew. Tried to get
Poor
that
timing there, huh?
Tried to get that microphone out of the way as soon as possible. Whew. Got me. But yeah, that's a lot of why I believe 6 or 7 wins is possible. Is because I just don't think it's that hard.
Well, and even Coach Rule said yesterday on Sports Nightly. Now, we got to hear him there. We got to hear Coach Satterfield after practice. Also, Barrett Liebentritt and Ethan Piper, which I didn't get too much out of the actual practice audio.
No.
But listening to Coach Rule in Sports Nightly is just always – like, you should have seen – like, did you actually pull it up on YouTube, Sports Nightly, like the actual show – and see the comment section?
No, I didn't.
It was blowing up.
Really?
And just like excitement. You can tell that fans know that football season is 8 days away for Nebraska. You can just tell they are all in to hear their coach talk.
Yeah.
And they were there to stay on that interview. But that's beside the point. What I heard from Coach yesterday is along those same lines. It's not about results right now. It's about the process. And he said the worst thing you can do is go into year 2 and it still be year 1.
Yeah.
And so that had me thinking about, though, what he said when he first came to Nebraska and saying that he doesn't feel like it's going to be a slow burn.
Yeah.
He feels like that they're already at that year 2 point. So I almost wonder if him saying that is him actually talking about this year. He's saying the worst thing that you can do in year 2, which in Matt Rule's year 1 is technically year 2 in his mind. The worst thing you can do is it still feels like last year.
Yeah.
And so moving forward from that, that's why he talks about the process more than he talks about the results right now. Because if he can get these guys to just continually buy into that process, you can steal a few games throughout this season. I told the boys this last night too. They asked me what a successful season would be for Coach Rule. In his mind, what would be a successful season? In Coach Rule's mind, I honestly believe if he feels like he got the best out of his guys for 8 games this year, that's a successful season in his mind. You don't have to win all 8 games.
Right.
Most of the time, you'll play your best football, and sometimes it's just not on your side that
like
day,
Michigan's
right?
better than Nebraska.
Right.
Like you could play your best football game against Michigan. Unless Michigan also plays poorly, you're not beating them, right? Which is possible.
Right.
Michigan might play poorly. You might play really well. But your A game this year does not beat Michigan's A game. And that's okay for right now.
Right. So you could find your way into the loss column just because of that. But if he could get 8 games where these guys are playing out of their mind when they're playing their best football, you'll win 6 games.
Oh, for sure.
You'll win 6.
Yeah.
And that's I really believe is the expectation for Coach Rule. He wants to get at least 8 games where these guys, he gets 100% out of his guys.
Well, and you look at the year 2s in the past for Rule. At Temple, at Baylor, where are they at? They're right at that 6-7 win mark that I was talking about. If he believes this is year 2 or feels more like a year 2, then why shouldn't I believe that also, right? In terms of the number of wins that he's getting at. This is, while it is a big build, it's nowhere near the spot that he was in before with Temple and Baylor. Like, that's clear to me.
We have a lot to get to today on the show. We'll get more into thoughts from Coach Rule from yesterday's Sports Nightly interview. We'll get into some of the practice audio. Creighton is a national title contender again. We will talk about that. We will catch up with Brian Christopherson, Kevin Sjuts, Paul Keels from Ohio State, and Cynthia Frelund. We'll also get into news surrounding former President Ted Carter, I should say. He's current right now, but he'll soon be former. We'll do that all throughout the show.
We'll be right back in 5 minutes. We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
I think now we're not installing anything anymore, so they've learned, they're learning and continuing to learn the playbook, so it allows them to go out there and play fast and play, with peace of mind. You can see that their confidence is growing. I think they're getting used to the physical aspect of college football, so they just keep going. We tell them every day, just get 1% better every day and look up, halfway during the season, we have a pretty good product.
All right, that's Coach Satterfield yesterday following practice. I regret to inform you that I still have not figured out what this offense will look like, and I wasn't hopeful when I saw that the interview was only 7 minutes long. I thought, you know what, if we actually get something out of this, it's probably going to be about 15, 16 minutes, but since it was only 7, I think I have to wait until 8:31 to really see what this offense looks like, Ravi.
Yeah, I think that's fair. like I have ideas, right? We talked about during the Pinnacle Bank Championship. I think,
and I'm cool with ideas.
I think there's concepts that we're going to see.
And he tells us that he likes, 7-8 linemen. He likes that they've cleaned up the operation a little bit. He likes the tempo, but those are things that I would expect you to do during fall camp.
I think, Coach Rule's given us some indication of, they want to take care of the football. They want to be kind of a run first type team. So I do have certain things that I expect to see from both what they've told us and from what I saw at South Carolina last year with Coach Satt. And so, but in terms of the entire package of the offense and what that's going to look like, I do think there's quite a bit of ambiguity there. And I don't think that's an accident. You mentioned how Nebraska has an advantage against Minnesota because of so many of the unknowns. Now, for me, that's even more so on defense because the 3-3-5 is such kind of an outlier in terms of defensive schemes. Plus, I do think it's going to look different than it did at Syracuse than it's going to here. So I think defense is a real wild card for teams to prepare for. But offensively, I don't think they're going to give you any indication outside of what you can find on film from last year about what they're trying to do on offense besides vague generalities about like, we got to be able to run the football and we got to play, clean, mistake-free football, those types of things. And that's not real specific, right? Although you can do that through a lot of different methods. Like there's a million different ways to run the football successfully, right? Obviously, it all starts with the offensive line, but scheme-wise, it can look a bunch of different ways. You can be talking about I formation, you can go 2 tight ends, you can go spread, you can do a bunch of different things to successfully run the football. You can do QB run, you can do running back run, you can have your fullbacks that we've been talking about, you can have jet sweeps and wide receivers. Like there's a million different ways to run the football. So him being like, we want to run the football doesn't tell you that much, right?
Right.
Like almost every coach this side of the GOAT, Mike Leach, RIP, like wants to run the football in some form or fashion, right? So it's kind of a general platitude about like, we got to be able to run the football. What does that actually mean? No one knows yet, right? Is there going to be a bunch of QB run? Yeah, I think so. Is there going to be a bunch of 2 tight end sets? Yeah, I think so. But what does that look like as a whole offense? I have no idea.
And maybe the people out there can inform us. Give us a call on the Warhorse Casino phone line, 888-638-4876. Warhorse is the only casino in Nebraska where you can place a sports bet, and they have to be placed in person with either a teller or at one of the kiosks. You can use the Warhorse Casino app to view live odds and build your bets anywhere, and then scan the QR code at the casino to place your wager. And, as I was listening more to Coach Satt, I wanted to ask you because I don't know if I – just kind of when you barely hear something and you're like, wait, did he actually just say that? But I didn't go back and listen to see the context of the question. When he said 65%, was he talking about completion percentage?
Yes.
So Coach Satt wants 65% completion percentage. Like that's like the goal. That's what you're shooting for, or that's the expectation. Because as I thought more about it, how many quarterbacks that play a good amount of games in Nebraska or at Nebraska have thrown a completion percentage of 65% in a season?
Ooh, not a lot. You're talking, I think Zach Taylor did it. I'm fairly sure Joe Gans did it. Your boy, Joe Gans.
Joe Gans, I believe, did do it.
If he wasn't, he was close.
I think he was the only one that did it. Joe Gans played from, all right, well, let's just go career here. Let's do career because it's easier to track.
It's easier to track. It's harder to do, but it's easier to track. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just going to go from the career side of things.
Sure.
Gans was 65.1% for his career.
Sure. And I think
he threw the ball a ton.
I think that 1 year as a starter, as the full-time starter, I think he was over 65% for that year as well. I want to say Zach Taylor did it.
Zach Taylor's career is 57.2. So if he did 65 in a season, that would shock me because he must have a huge
way
dip-off.
Lower than I expected.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. So I'm sorry, that's 2005 to 2006. So
that is way lower than I expected.
Taylor Martinez 59.8%. Tommy Armstrong 53.3%. Adrian Martinez, 63.5%. He was the next closest on this list, unless you kind of go down the list and, you get Sam Keller in 2007, who had 205 completions. He had 63.1. And if you go way low, you'll find guys that, threw the ball 66 times, right? And could get to that number. Like Luke McCaffrey had 56 completions. He was 64.8.
Sure.
But we're not talking about those guys. We're talking about just the guys in that percentage column. That's hard to do.
Man, Zach Taylor didn't even crack 60.
One quarterback.
Yeah.
Man. One quarterback was able to do that in his career. So if you expect Jeff Sims to be able to do that with the inconsistencies that he's carrying over from Georgia Tech last season, I mean, you're swimming in different waters. I mean, this seems like you're swimming in La La Land. That seems way too high to actually get to.
Well, so I think there's a couple things that are involved here. And the first is what the 65% completion percentage tells me more than anything is the type of routes they're going to be running. That's what it informs, I think, the most about the offense is
maybe, right?
If you
maybe short yardage.
Yeah, if you're expecting a 65% completion, to me that says, hey, we're going to have a lot of like easy pitch and catch for Jeff Sims, and he has to just hit those throws.
And I'm with you, but what about if they run the ball as much as they say they will? Now you're lowering your chances to build up that percentage.
Sure.
You have to be even more on point on those short yardage, on those deep balls. Because say Jeff Sims, and I don't know what the average, like if you go to Jeff Sims stats for me, tell me what he averaged a game at Georgia Tech, like passes wise. Like, did he throw 20 balls a game? Did he throw 25? Did he throw 30? Did he throw more? I'm curious to know how many balls he actually threw just for a game. Give me a good ballpark.
So you're looking at 20 to 25.
Okay, so 20, we'll say 25. We'll go on the high end for him. So if you're going to throw 25 balls, then you have to be pretty spot on with these throws if you're going to mix in a lot of run packages.
Yeah.
Now, the lower you go, because if you're going to implement the run a lot more, then you probably saw at Georgia Tech, because Georgia Tech was losing in most games. So they weren't running the football a whole lot. They were relying on him to throw the ball to at least have a chance to win.
Yeah.
Now, once they kind of fell off in games, you're just kind of working now at this point to, get back and ready for next week. But if you're like lowering those amount of pass numbers, now you really have, if you throw 15 balls in a game, you may have to complete 12 of them in order to like really stay on pace for that 65%.
Yeah, which is why I think it informs about the offense, because I don't think Marcus Satterfield is probably a terribly unrealistic person. So if he knows, like I would guess you're going to have Jeff Sims pretty consistently in the 18 to 22 pass attempts range. I don't think they're probably going to air it out a ton with him in terms of throwing 30 times a game or more. And if they do, they're probably not in the spot they want to be in, right? I would say 25 is probably about the max you would be comfortable with Sims throwing every like game in, game out, right? If you're getting much higher than that, you're probably not in a great spot, or you're not running the football the way you want to. So let's say you're in that 18 to 22 range. The 65% is only 13 for 20. Like that's not crazy.
Right.
Like that's,
and I'm with you.
That's pretty reasonable. Yeah. And if you're managing the types of throws that he's making, then 13 for 20 is really doable.
Right.
I agree. If you're getting much lower than that, it does kind of start to become, hey, you got to be 5 for 8 or whatever. And those numbers get a lot smaller. But I would guess they're going to be really strategic about the downfield throws they ask him to make. And that may be more to do with the receivers they have as much as it is Jeff Sims' quarterbacking ability, right? They don't have, you look at the wide receiver room, you don't see an obvious deep threat there, right? Like Marcus Washington's probably your best option, but like Billy Kemp, not really known for his stretching the field, more of a possession type guy. So it may be telling us more than we think that's the number.
It'd be easier to defend though, knowing that.
Sure. I think
Nebraska doesn't have a lot of deep option guys.
I think you're going to have to stretch the field with the tight ends. I think is what's going to happen.
That's a good way to look at it too. So for perspective, Spencer Rattler, 66.2% last year at South Carolina. So it is possible that Marcus Satterfield can get somebody to that number. And Rattler was inconsistent as all heck.
At best.
But he also threw for 3,000 yards. We'll see if Jeff Sims can mirror that number. We'll take a short break.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
I think he improved every single day. I think that he had a goal. He wanted to take care of the football. He wanted to increase his completion percentage. The first 4 or 5 days, the completion percentage wasn't as good as we wanted. Getting used to, again, playing all these different looks and stuff we're getting. And I think he just chipped away at it. And by the end of camp, it's around where we want it to be. And I think that he did a really nice job of taking care of the football. That was a huge emphasis for him. And then him just not being scared to use his legs. Don't be scared to use your legs when needed.
All right, welcome back. Coffee and Cream on ESPN Radio 590 here in Omaha. We're live on Twitter, live on YouTube, the Hurrdat Sports YouTube page. You can chime in there on the chat line, or you can give us a call on the Warhorse Casino phone line, 888-638-4876. Ravi Lulla in the chair today for DB all day, as DB is out at practice, and I don't envy him one bit, being out in the heat today. I'm sure that, he told us yesterday he took like 3 or 4 showers before coming in. I wouldn't be shocked if that system got repeated today.
Yeah, we might need to check in with him and check in how many showers it's going to be today.
What should we set the over under at? Like for the day?
4.5.
I'll take the over.
5.5.
I'll take the under. I think he's going to I bet he takes 5 showers.
It's a 5-shower day. We'll have to. I'll ask him when we go record our podcast. I'll go check in with him and see, like, all right, how many showers are you at today? Because yesterday he was like, hey, I think he said he took 2 before 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right, and then he took another one after practice.
So he was at 3 by the time he got here.
It wouldn't shock me, though, if he took 2 more throughout the day.
He definitely took at least 1 more. Yeah, 5 is probably the right number. So I'll give you 4.5, but at minus money for the over.
Okay. I'll take the minus money.
I'm going to say minus 150 for the over on.
Because he's somebody that is so particular about just how his body feels.
Yeah.
So he's not somebody that would just like let the sweat dry.
Right. Yes. He's not going to just let it sit on him.
No. So I'm pretty confident in my 5 number. What I'm not confident in is the 65% number, as we were just following up with it. And then we were talking during the break, which is why Shane is yelling at us 5 seconds to put our headsets on.
Put your mics on.
we were just looking at some of like the best quarterbacks that have come out of college football lately, because college football is in such a major passing transition to where it was once a sport where you wanted to run the ball a ton, and now it's like, hey, we want to see the flashy plays. So we looked up Patrick Mahomes' numbers. We looked up because he played in an air raid.
Yeah.
And in his final season in 2016, Patrick Mahomes threw about 50 passes a game.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely insane.
It's a high number.
It's insane.
It's
Caleb Williams last year, for perspective, only threw about 35.
35, yeah.
And then Spencer Rattler averaged around 30 passes
last year at
game.
South Carolina.
So
I would expect Jeff Sims to be under the Spencer Rattler.
But looking at all 3 of those guys, they're all at 65%.
Yeah.
And if that's the direction that college football is moving, and that's the direction that everybody wants to see it go, then Marcus Satterfield is right on point.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different ways to take what he said. And for me, it wasn't, hey, if he doesn't complete 65% of his passes, we can't be successful. I think it was
sure.
I think it was more, hey, to operate our offense as efficiently as we want to, 65% is the number that we're looking at, right?
Right.
I think he could complete 60% of his passes and still have a successful offense.
Honestly, man, you could probably, if you could.
It depends on how well they run the ball.
If you were
right?
1 of 2 on every pass and you mixed in a good run game, you could probably be a successful team altogether.
Well, yeah, and it depends. There's other factors there, right? Like how good is the defense? How good is the running game? All those sorts of things. What type of passes? Because if you're 1 for 2 and every pass is over 10 yards, you feel really good about that. If you're 1 for 2 and every pass is under 5 yards, you don't feel great about that efficiency. So that's why I think that 65% number informs more the types of passes we're going to see from Jeff Sims than it does the actual a reflection of his actual accuracy. I don't think they'd put that number out there if it was an unrealistic goal for Jeff Sims to hit. I mean, people thought he really struggled with his accuracy and stuff at Georgia Tech. He did crack 60 his sophomore year at Georgia Tech too. So
not too shabby.
Like 60 would be a good number, and I think a number that you could be successful with at Nebraska, running an offense that I think is going to help him out.
What will the offense look like, Ravi, you ask? Hey, 65% of completed passes. I'm in.
We hope.
I'm in.
We hope.
If that's what the offense looks like, I'm in. Also,
so what's the ideal amount of passes you want to throw to get that then? I mean, I know that's what you guys are just talking about.
I think under 25. I want under 25.
Really?
Under 25.
I would say I would like to see 25 to 30 out of Jeff Sims. But if they're mixing in the run game as much as they say they will,
right,
and it is under 25, and the run game's successful, I'm not going to be mad. Like,
okay.
I'm not going to be mad about what I see. I just want to see something.
Yeah,
I want to see it.
You want to see what looks like a functional offense that has a plan and knows what they're trying to do. For me, I think the ideal number is between like 18 and 22. But that means that they're running the ball well and they're only throwing when they want to rather than hey, we're behind in games. Our running game isn't getting any traction. We have to throw the ball because nothing else is working.
And they're getting first downs.
Yeah, and they're getting first downs running
we
the ball.
need first downs. That's actually a big focal point against Minnesota because we saw what happened last year whenever they came out of halftime against Minnesota and could not get a first down.
Well, and plus then you keep, obviously Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, these are all teams that kind of want to control the clock against you a little bit as well. If Nebraska can turn the tables on them a little bit, that can be pretty helpful for them. So getting those first downs, running the ball, those are, they're basic things, right? This is that simple versus easy thing we talk about sometimes. Really simple ideas, not always easy to execute, as we've seen over the last 5-6 years.
But isn't that where you have to start? You have to start with the simple ideas.
It's all about that process, man.
Absolutely.
It's about trust in the process.
And that's something that Rule said last night too, is right. We want to win right away, but we won't take any shortcuts to get there. And that to me is the big difference, right? I think if you gave Scott Frost some truth serum and asked him what he did wrong.
I don't think Scott Frost wants to take any truth serum.
I don't either. But if you got it, and maybe you slipped it in a margarita and he drank it by accident.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that.
I'm sure you don't.
But if you gave Scott Frost some truth serum, I think the thing that he would tell you is he tried to take some shortcuts early because he was so desperate to win right away with some of the guys he brought in, sacrificing the culture and things like that. Now, was he capable of establishing the right culture anyway? I have no idea, and we'll never know. But he sacrificed that opportunity to try and win sooner than they were probably ready to. And that's not something that I am worried about Matt Rule doing.
Ken on YouTube, if he only completes 25% of his passes, but each one is a touchdown, I'll be happy.
Yeah, I could handle that.
Yeah, I'm sure most people could.
1 for 4, but every one
pass
is a touchdown.
Can you imagine? Jeff Sims again throws 12 passes. 4 are now touchdowns because Andrew can do math. It just takes him some time. 4 are touchdowns. Not too shabby.
I think you would take that ratio. He would have the world's strangest QB rating.
I think he'd be happy. He would lead the league in touchdowns. That's for darn sure.
Sure.
And least passes thrown. Now, we heard from Barrett Liebentritt too yesterday, and I just wanted to get to this point quickly before we move on and talk to Brian Christopherson. And we have a heavy guest hour coming up. We talked to BC at 8 o'clock. Then we have Kevin Sjuts. And then we'll talk Ohio State football a little bit. Yesterday, we had a question come up on the Sports Six-Pack. How concerning is it for Ohio State that Kyle McCord still hasn't grasped the number one spot yet after being on every preseason poll in the top 3?
Yep.
That's pretty concerning, and we got into that a little bit, so we'll talk to Paul Keels, and he's the play-by-play voice of Ohio State football, so he should be able to give us some good insight there. We'll also touch base with him on President Ted Carter, who had just signed on with Ohio State. He will be leaving Nebraska at the end of this year. And then we'll talk to Cynthia Frelund at the top of the hour and do some NFL talk because we haven't gotten into that all too much. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to get back to Liebentritt. I've been on this, Ravi, for a little bit now. I think the way Nebraska wins this year is by the Barrett Liebentritts of the world. The Bonners of the world, the Borkachers of the world. They're not the guys that are going to be headline names, but the guys that are just strictly role players and hard workers, those are going to be the ones that win Nebraska games this year. Like you'll see a game against Illinois, right? Close game. Nebraska's marching in the end. Borkacher catches the game-winning touchdown. You'll see his name pop up in that regard. Then you'll see like a Musket third down, and Liebentritt's the guy that gets you that third down conversion, that first down you needed to eat clock, win the game. I wholeheartedly believe that Nebraska wins games this year by the so-called no names to everybody else. Not to Nebraska and Husker Nation, but to the outside college football world. They're going to be like Liebentritt. Like, who the heck is this guy? Borkacher. I don't know that guy's name.
Yeah.
You're going to get the guys that aren't like highly regarded out of high school or like major recruits or things like that. Those are going to be the guys that win for Nebraska this year. I just have a weird feeling.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I think it's going to be, I categorize those guys as the grinders. Nebraska's going to win because of the grinders this year, and that's a direct reflection of
The
their
scrappy guys.
Yeah, they're the workers, the blue collar, like the grinders. Those are the guys that they reflect their head coach, they reflect the coaching staff, they reflect the type of football that not only Matt Rule and company want to play, but they reflect
it's being injected into their veins right now.
Well, and it's really at the core of who Nebraska football is in its DNA, regardless of what the offense looks like, the defense looks like, whatever. Nebraska football at its core has always been about being successful by outworking people. And so, yeah, I agree with you. If Nebraska is successful, not just this year, but moving forward, it's going to be because of the grinders that they get it done.
Brian Christopherson could help us answer some of the questions that are still out there, that still surround the program. And we'll talk a little bit about the audio captured yesterday and what the energy is like inside the room when he's around these guys heading into Minnesota. We'll do all that next with Brian Christopherson.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds.
Yards to the house. And Stroud back to pass.
Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hurrdat Sports Radio. Here is Husker 24/7 senior writer, Brian Christopherson.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit of a circus act.
Brian Christopherson.
Well, I mean, that's pretty interesting.
Brian Christopherson.
I kind of enjoy that.
Here is Brian Christopherson.
All right, guys, top of the hour here on Coffee and Cream. Ravi Lulla in the chair for DB just for today. As DB is out at football practice. They've had the early morning days this week because of the heat wave that's come through. You know, I'm curious even tomorrow, Ravi. Did you look at the temperature? Like, are they going to extend that into tomorrow? Because it's supposed to be a high of 100 tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know. It still might be like tomorrow still feels like a morning day. It's supposed to be basically the same thing as today.
Right. But at the same time, like, I get why they would want to practice in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to just then have, like, what do you do on Friday? Like a walkthrough? Like, do you...
Well, so they're playing Friday, right? So maybe tomorrow's their walkthrough.
Which is fine, but I meant like, okay, so say you go tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And then you have like over 24 hours until you play the game. So I'm like, how do you like get them back into the mojo? Because if you practice in the afternoon, so you practice from like, 4 to 6, whatever it is. Well, then like, okay, at least we're playing tomorrow night.
Yeah.
And it matches up more than, hey, you practice in the morning. Now you have a lot of time off.
Maybe you do another walkthrough Friday morning.
And that's what what I was kind of
maybe do like
wondering.
a walkthrough or light tomorrow.
They could just practice tomorrow morning and then be like, all right, we're good for Friday.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea.
So curiosity. What is it like? What's it with the
killed,
cat?
Killed the cat.
Killed the cat.
Yeah.
I was gonna say like something like bite or strikes, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right.
I don't think that's right.
BC, what's up, man?
Hey, how you doing? No, it's much worse than bit the cat. It killed it.
I can't hear you. Shane, is that on our end?
On mute. Or somebody on mute?
I don't know.
Bueller.
Yeah, it looks good on this side.
Anybody?
Am I good?
That is funny. Nice work there, Ravi.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, we still don't have his audio.
Yep.
Can't hear me?
Working through the technical issues. Still can't hear.
Got it. I fixed
BC.
it.
Oh, it's on our end. BC, now talk.
My bad.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah,
there we go.
BC's like, I know I plugged everything in right.
It wasn't my fault. Is that what we're saying? It was Shane's fault.
It was Shane's fault. And he owned it. He owned it. That is what Matt Rule loves, man. Accountability.
Love it.
Right?
BC, what's up, man?
No, I like Shane, by the way, so that's just me messing with him. But things are good. What do we got to talk about? We got things, right? Only 8 days till football. Is it 8 now?
Yeah, 8 days, and we talked at least in the early parts of the 7 o'clock hour that there's also more college football games this weekend that are kind of just getting slept on because all we care about is 8 days away.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that Nebraska avoids that week 0, not just because they're 0-2 in them, but enjoy a little Notre Dame, Navy, and then Louisiana Tech is playing late, so those people who are real nerds can do their scouting report on a Husker non-con opponent late at night.
Now, BC, you've been around this team for such a long time now. I'm sure that you just can't wait to talk to a coach or a player after a game at this point. But as you kind of went through fall camp with this team, what is the energy like in the room 8 days out?
It's always, you get to that point in mid to August 20th plus where it's just like, can they hit someone else? Everybody's kind of talking about that. And you can tell they just want to move on to that next phase. The one thing I've said before, and I like the tone that Rule has set. He's made it about the totality of the season ahead, not just this game right in front of him. And what I mean is he's not making it like, we got to have this game. Like there's not this, they have to win this game. What if they don't? Am I going to do yard work the rest of the fall if I'm a Husker fan, if they don't win at Minnesota? In the past couple of years, and of course this is connected to it being year 4 and year 5 of Frost, where there's more heat on you to get it done in those seasons. There was definitely this urgency and just constant talk in the air in August about they got to win the first game. What if they didn't? And I feel like the pressure was pretty heavy on the guys when they went into those contests. So I do like, from a psychology standpoint, how they've kind of built into this. And that, of course, is is helped by it being the first year of a new coach, where there is going to be patience, where if you lose by 10 points or something, people are going to say, okay, it's the first game. Let's see where this goes. But Rule's done a good job with that tone, and I think it's settled over the whole team.
BC, I'm curious, we don't really know what the offense is going to look like in terms of,
what makes you say that, Ravi?
specific scheme and everything. When you hear Marcus Satterfield talk about, the goal being 65% completion for Jeff Sims, does that give you any indication of what you think maybe some of their pass concepts look like? Or is that more of just kind of a generality? Hey, it'd be nice to hit that number.
No, that's a good question. I think it's more of a generality, the way he said it, as to like that's sort of your standard number, coaches. If you had to pick one out of the air, 65 is one you hear a lot. That said, I think to hit that, you have to have a QB who realizes it's not there. There's the check down. That's an easy completion, not just because it helps your stats. You don't want your quarterback looking at it that way. But you want him viewing it as like, I get it to that fast guy. He can go get me 6 yards and make it 2nd and 4, and it sounds like Sims has excelled at that. They've been pretty honest, I feel like, about how practices have gone and how certain players have developed. Like you heard the other day, Satterfield say, the first 4 or 5 days of camp wasn't going that hot in that category for Sims, but they really picked it up. And by the end of this practice session this offseason, he's at about that number. So that's encouraging. And I think there's optimism on that side of the ball that, hey, we've seen everything from Tony White's defense. We've seen all these alignments and different coverage packages. Whatever gets thrown at them, there's sort of a hope, I think, that going against the guys they have and the scheme they have has prepared them to kind of handle and adjust to different things they're going to see in those first few weeks.
Brian, I'm curious with the Jeff Sims thing. They said, Satterfield said specifically, when he stopped being afraid to use his legs, that he got a lot better. How much do you think is correlated between Jeff Sims being willing to put pressure on the defense with his legs and his ability to keep that completion percentage where they want it?
Yeah, that's always an interesting thing, because you do sometimes find those QBs who they're so dedicated, and I understand it, to the art of being a passer, and I am this guy, that sometimes you've seen it at the NFL level with certain guys where they're like, they're not going to take advantage sometimes of the gifts they have when it's, that plays in front of them where they could go get 10 yards. So I don't know how much of a battle that's been. That was an interesting line that you cite. It suggests that at least at first there was maybe some hesitancy to run in certain spots. Mm-hmm. You could read into it that way. And maybe that's changed over time. There's no question. I mean, when Rule talks about Sims, the runner, he says like, this is a 4-4 guy, and whether it's 4-4 or not, the point is he can blaze. I mean, he's a guy who can really, has some agility too. And the thing about him as a runner that's such an asset is he's a guy like a defensive back's going to see him coming downhill on him and be like, I don't know about this. I might make a business decision here. So you do want to see some of that from Sims, while also understanding, and let's go back to Big Ten Media Days. What did he say off to the side? He said, yeah, I am a passer first. That's the quarterback I am. So he takes a lot of pride in that. So that's a good question, knowing something to watch, like how much he wants to run, and if that's a thing or not, if he's hesitant at all.
BC, I want to go back on something Deshaun Singleton said over the weekend. He complimented the coaches, saying when they speak, everyone listens. How much does that speak not only to the culture of the newly renovated Matt Rule program, but the silent impact it also has on the players? Like, for example, like Singleton, he went on to say that like he was walking by the film room and he saw the coaches studying up without players in the room. And that just had like just such a major impact, just knowing that the coaches are there and doing all the work they can to get the players ready without players actually being in the room.
Yeah. There's definitely a sense from quotes here and there that guys are seeing something in coaches maybe they didn't see. previously in certain aspects, and that kind of came out in a couple of those comments maybe. But Singleton also spoke just as much about like the juniors and seniors on this team, and like their voices being the kind that he respects. And he said, "I'm not a follower, but I know who to follow." I love that quote. And he's Gifford has become a guy like that. And it's interesting, some of the guys who have developed their voices under this staff, like Reimer, I don't think on the surface, when you're around him, he doesn't seem like he's the most talkative guy, but I feel like he's got a big voice on that team and is not afraid to share it, and guys will listen to him. Nick Henrich is obviously like that, but a guy like Gifford, he's really come out of left field to me as far as that sort of category of player, where we're talking about him as like the alpha in the room, and whatever he says, guys are at attention and stuff like that. I think that's a good deal when you've got some players at the very top where whatever comes out of their mouth, everybody's really respecting it because they know these are the guys who are doing it right. And if they're doing it this way, then I better do it that way. So that's what you're trying to get, is that trickle down effect. And we'll see how far they've gotten with that and what it means as far as wins and losses and stuff. But I think they feel like they're a little bit ahead of the game as far as the culture over in that building. There probably wasn't as much attrition as we thought there was going to be, honestly, this off season and stuff. When you go look at the last 8 or 9 months, I honestly thought there'd be a lot more of it. So some areas like that, when you kind of step back from the forest a little bit and look at it, you're like, oh yeah, it's actually gone pretty smoothly in some respects.
BC, I'm curious, through the fall camp, with the comments that we've seen from the coaches and some of the players as well, has your expectation for the season changed at all based on what you've seen from them? We've been talking a lot about body language and how these guys carry themselves and things like that. I'm just curious if that's had any effect for you in what you're expecting this year.
I don't know if it has. I think I'm in, like a lot of the fans are right now. I think there's a lot of people who think like there's really a good plan with these coaches. You kind of believe them when they talk, and yet you are sort of, from the last few years of watching this program, sort of built to not expect things to go just right. And so until you see this team under this staff, like maybe it's next Thursday, maybe it's in the fourth quarter, it's a slugfest, and Nebraska is the team who is kind of taking down Minnesota's will in the fourth quarter, and they win it by a touchdown. That's the sort of thing that'll, I think, change everything for fans, where they see a game or two like that and they're like, okay, that's something that just hasn't happened around here. But I've always said like 7-6 has kind of been my sweet spot. I kind of use the bowl game as like my out. Like they could go 7-5 in the regular season, or 6-6, and somehow you get to 7-6. But that's what I'm sticking to. It's kind of what I've said all along. I was a guy who, when Matt Rule was still coaching Carolina, and Nebraska had an opening, I was one of those guys who, like, man, that'd be something if that fell into place, because I just think he's built to coach the college game. I've liked what he's done building stuff, and I believe he'll do pretty well here. But I do think there's going to be some growing pains along the way this year, and so I don't know how far a leap they can make. We're going to know a lot more in 8 days. I mean, this is one of the great mystery Husker games of all time as they go up to Minneapolis. About anything could happen in my book.
BC, we had a question come through on Twitter from our guy Cody, and he wants to know a little bit about Chief Borders. He hasn't heard a lot about him this August. You wrote a piece on him, if I remember correctly, it was back in the early parts of August. Where do you see him making his impact on the field? And I say it that way because, he's not right now in line to be a starter, but where do you see Chief Borders making the biggest impact for himself and this team?
Yeah, I mean, I see him as one of those jack linebackers with MJ Sherman, Jamari Butler, probably in that category. It feels like. And the other day, Rule was kind of going through, without naming names, like the numbers at certain spots that they felt good about. And he said, we have 3 jacks who are basically, they're very close, is what he was getting at. So Borders is right there in that conversation. And he's a versatile body where you could line up in a lot of different spots. I think the way you frame the question's right. I sort of don't feel like he's on the top line going into the season, but for a defense that wants to play, we've heard as many as 25 guys in waves. That means a guy like him is going to get his share of snaps throughout the season. They're going to trust some guys. And at first, that first week, there'll be some guy you thought was going to play more and he only plays like 17 snaps, but they need him to be quality snaps where you don't feel like they dropped off a cliff when he's out there.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson of Husker 24/7. BC, I'm curious. I want to switch over to the Ted Carter thing for a little bit here. It's probably not an overstatement to say that Matt Rule's not here without Ted Carter. Is that fair?
I think it's pretty fair based off just Rule's comments that he's made. I mean, he said as much, so I think we can say that. When he was getting advice from people that he trusted, when they heard Ted Carter was the president at Nebraska for the system, they're like, that's a pretty good deal for you, to have him in that position. And I think Ted Carter also related, they had that commonality of they had sort of crossed paths in a distant way, where he was at Navy and Ted Carter always brought up that game where Temple just whacked Navy in 2016 or whatever it was. And so there was really a shared admiration there, still is, I'm sure. But I don't, it's not a small issue. I mean, they're going to have to find the right person for that chair.
Most definitely.
That's a monster hire. And, it's not like it's the biggest deal right in front of you right now. We're just in year one of Rule. But as this thing goes along and you get into year 3 and 4, and if he really starts to have success, you want him to obviously feel really good about the chain of command there.
Well, what comes next, BC, is really the ultimate question because, as we sit back and reflect on how impactful President Carter has been, at least in the last month or two, I mean, the Board of Regents voted to make him the overseer of all of Husker athletics. And now, boom, he's off in running to go to Ohio State, which is fine. We're happy for him to see him pursue that point in his career. But finding that right person to oversee athletics, there's not another President Carter out there. I mean, you could maybe get close, but there's not another guy that thinks like him, has acted like him, or is even really good at matching up the left and the right and trying to find a good middle ground for everybody. I just wonder about that decision by the Board of Regents. Do you think we'll see anything in regards to a retraction there, or is it just going to remain the same? And then whoever steps into that role is going to be the overseer.
You're asking all the right questions, which we don't know yet, but they're the right questions. And when they do find or look for whoever is going to fill this spot, it does have to be somebody. Like, I'm not one of those persons who's like, oh, just care about the athletics. Don't worry about the academics part. I mean, that's a huge job to be the NU president. There's much more that goes into it than how's it going over at the football program. But I think what Nebraska did have sort of set up with its last 2 presidents, and you could mention Hank Bounds in this category too. He was a guy who really cared about athletics, and he always said, it's the doorstep to the university, and you do need a person who sees that. And because I think it's true, and I'm not saying it, some people could argue, is that a good thing or whatever, but it's true. And I've said for a long time, the University of Nebraska Lincoln will be in a much better place, and it'll be kicking a lot more when that football program is rolling. It's just a fact. Like when I went to school there, and I was born and raised in Omaha, and I'm not lying to you. There were kids around me who that was part of why they went to UNL, was there was to be around that, what was going on with that program and stuff like that. And then the academics become a big part of it too once you get there. But it does matter toward recruiting in all categories, like people in your academic department, students, your enrollment, all that stuff ties into the success in some way of the football program. It really does. And you need somebody who sees that right off the bat. And if they don't, I don't think it's the right hire. I just don't.
BC, do you think, you mentioned the, let's say it's going well for Rule 3-4 years down the road. Do do you think that the leadership that he's talked about so much from Ted Carter and then from Trev Alberts, how much of that do you think will affect, I guess, how Matt Rule's tenure here goes? I mean, is it more disconnected than I'm thinking right now, or is it kind of more intertwined in terms of maybe how long we see Matt Rule stay here?
Yeah, I think it's just like it's too early to say, honestly. I mean, it's one of those things where if you nail the next hire, on this and you set it up well, it's fine. It could be fine. There are really capable people who could fill that role and maybe step into sort of what Ted Carter was doing. 4 or 5 years ago, nobody in Nebraska knew who Ted Carter was, sure. So he comes on the scene, and he obviously more just as impactful, honestly, as his relationship with Rule was his relationship, I believe, with Trev Alberts. I think he really saw something in Trev when it came time to hire the athletic director, a couple of years ago. So he's been very meaningful as far as, I think, 2 monster hires for the future of Husker athletics and football. But yeah, I don't know what the next twist and turn is going to be. It's something, though, that I don't think you just push to the side and act like, oh, big deal. I know there's sometimes the want to do that, but I think it does matter. And this is going to be a very critical hire. It would be anyway. You're hiring the NU president. I don't want to diminish how big a deal that is in itself, but we all know that, you do need that stabilizing force at the top when it comes to athletics too, because we've heard so many football coaches, whether they've done good or bad here, talk about you have to have that right. Like, you have to have that chain of command in place that they feel good about. Otherwise, things at some point do fall apart.
BC, I'll get you out of here on this. If there's one thing on your sheet, on your checklist that has to go right for you to feel comfortable with, hey, no matter how the Minnesota game turns out, this was progress, what is that in your mind?
It's a very competitive O-line, and I don't know exactly how you categorize that, but it's sort of one of those things you guys know it when you see it. Nebraskans know it when they see it. It's a group that, I'm not saying the first or second series in an emotional game like that where Minnesota's all fired up on their home turf, you're not going to go 3 and out or have to deal with some of that. There's going to be adversity, but you're hoping it's one of those deals where, okay, it's time to run the ball. They can actually get their horns out and have some series where you're like, okay, there's 5 yards, there's 4 yards, and you're kind of watching it go downhill a bit. That would give me loads of encouragement just to see that. And I don't mind also if it's a game where Nebraska beats their head against the wall a little bit, but at some point you see it start to crack a little bit, and there it is. You start to get something from it. So that's the biggest thing to me. It's going to be a trenches game. Minnesota has won these alleyway fights with Nebraska last 3 years. There's no other way to spin it. And that's what this game will be. And you heard Rule say it last week. He was actually talking about the receivers and freshmen possibly playing. And he said, this is going to be a grown man game. This is going to be, this is a game for 21, 22-year-old guys who have been around the block a little bit. Maybe some, who knows, maybe an 18-year-old will step up and catch the, winning touchdown or something. But in the trenches, I just want to see Nebraska be ready to slug.
BC, we appreciate the time, man. Always great stuff. Enjoy the week. Again, 8 days away, so I'm sure the excitement is still building for you.
Yeah, sounds good. Next week, I'll have my bag packed right here next to me as I get ready to head out the door.
Big time. That's Brian Christopherson. Have a great day, man.
Yep, you too, guys.
Thanks, BC. Senior writer at Husker 24/7 at Husker 24/7 BC on Twitter. When we come back, we are talking to another guy out in Lincoln, Kevin Sjuts. He's the sports director at 10-11 now. A little bit of high school football, a little bit of Nebraska. That's next.
We'll be right back in 5 minutes. We'll be right back in 4 minutes. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Hey, welcome back, Coffee and Cream, alongside Ravi, Lulla, and Drew Rogers. Happy to have you with us. Before we get to Kevin Sjuts, I'll take a moment and tell you about Dyer Law. Dyer is the place that you need to go to if you are hurt or in a personal injury accident. You can count on the Dyer Law team to provide you with a helping hand when you need it. No matter what you're dealing with, call the Dyer Law team at 402-393-7529 or visit Dyer.law to chat with trusted professionals about your personal injury claim. That's Dyer, D-Y-E-R .law. You know, it sounds like something else. It could be an I, Ravi, but it's a Y. It's kind of like our next guest. You know, his last name is Sjuts, but it's S-J-U-T-S for Suits. Kevin Sjuts with us now. What's up, Kevin?
The J is in there for decoration, so thank you for pointing that out there.
You're welcome. It's like Christmas every day for you, right?
Sure, that's what you want to say.
Hey, so high school football season in full effect. You told me to ask you this a couple of weeks ago. You said, "Hey, ask me in a few weeks who the best team in Lincoln is." We saw the poll come out, and Lincoln Southeast is 7th on the list. Would that still be your choice for best team in Lincoln, or do you like somebody else that may be receiving votes like a Lincoln East?
I'm glad you remembered to ask me, Andrew. I think that's right on cue now that we have a sense of what the city is going to look like in terms of football this fall. Lincoln Southeast, in my opinion, is the best team here in Lincoln this year. They've got a lot of talent at a bunch of different spots, and they're really good up front. They return 4 of 5 starters up front, and I think Lincoln Southeast is the team to beat here in the city. I don't think that Lincoln East and possibly Lincoln North Star, they may not be too far behind, though. I think when these teams pair up with each other, we could have some exciting football in Lincoln this fall.
Kevin, I'm curious, is there a team outside of those three that you seem to think are fairly close to one another? Is there maybe a sleeper or a team that you think could be poised for a breakout season?
I've said this before. I think it's Lincoln North Star, and they're a big question mark because this coaching staff is in their second year. Of course, their offensive coordinator is Tommy Armstrong Jr. They have a Creighton Prep transfer that's contending for the starting quarterback job, and Dean Donaldson. He and Tommy have worked together for multiple years. So I don't know if you guys saw, but there is an account on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. And they put out a list of like projected over-unders. Not that anybody's going to bet on high school football, but it put Lincoln North Star at like 3.5 wins. And I said, I'm taking the over all day long. So tell me where the casino is that I can place my wager on.
You can only do it at Warhorse, man. You can only do it at Warhorse.
I don't know. It's in town. Maybe you can't when they're playing.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point.
Got to wait till they come up to Omaha.
Now, Kevin, you know, I was thinking about like other schools that you cover outside of just Lincoln, because we kind of hone in on the Class A schools, but your guys' viewing area is so big. Let's look in Class B for a sec and talk about maybe Waverly or Norris, who started off 1-0. What do you like about both of those teams in B? And would you say that Waverly is the best, let's say, close to Lincoln team or in your viewing area team that you can like think of in the ranking scale as the number one team in that area?
I think that's right. I think Waverly is the best Class B team in the greater Lincoln area. However, after Norris went and won on the road in week 0 over Blair, I think that if I just unanimously say it's no doubt Waverly, I've got some Norris people upset at me because I think Norris can be pretty good this year. You know, they took some lumps last year, but their schedule is so tough every year. Coming out with that week 0 win for the Titans, I think I'll put them on the map pretty quickly. But I think, you know, in terms of the Class B teams that we cover, those are the top 2 without question. Creek's building, Beatrice, they took a loss in week 1 against Elkhorn North, but that's a tough opponent for them. And then let's see what York can do. You know, we cover quite a bit of the York Dukes, and I think that they might just get lost in the shuffle. Glenn Snodgrass is a longtime coach there, and there's one consistent trait with every Glenn Snodgrass team, and that's they are so physical and they're good up front. And I know that he's got a group that Glenn really likes this year, and he's been playing some of these guys for the past couple of years, and they're now seniors. So at this senior class, I think that they have a chance to maybe be an under-the-radar Class B team that could make some noise late in the season.
Kevin, is there an individual player that, as you kind of look through your coverage area and teams you're going to see this year, is there a player or two that you're most looking forward to seeing in person this year?
It's Jeter Worthley, the quarterback at Lincoln East.
Absolutely.
Of course, he's an amazing baseball player. I mean, he plays like a college player as a high school sophomore last year at Lincoln East. He's committed to Michigan. Last year he played quarterback. And I don't know that he'd really played any football prior to that, but he's so athletic, and he's just got a really freakish ability to understand sports. His IQ for a new football player was off the charts. So now having a year under his belt, I think that the trajectory for Jeter as a quarterback, it is a pretty steep slope up. And so I'm really excited to watch him. What can he do? And he's got a ton of weapons all around him, like Dash Bauman and a good offensive line. So I'm looking forward to watching Lincoln East. I know they're on the road this week. They play at Kearney. But once they get back to Lincoln, that's going to be, my number one guy that I want to see play this fall.
All right, it's Fun Question Wednesday, Kevin. You ready?
Oh, let's go.
Would you rather be practicing in the heat like all these football players at Nebraska and in high school right now in full pads for only 20 minutes, or be forced to do a live shot during the hottest part of the day in a suit, knowing that you're going to be out there for probably at least 45 minutes because you have to get everything set up?
I'll take football practice without question because I work in water breaks. And plus, okay, so you mentioned the live shot thing. Our live reports from Big Ten Media Days in Indianapolis a few weeks ago, though it wasn't 105 degrees with a heat index of 119, it was really hot. And I was out there in a shirt and tie. And truth be told, I changed like 3 minutes. I took off a polo. I threw on a shirt and a tie just for the few minutes I needed to be on air. And the second I was done, I was drenched in that short time. I ripped it off and went right back to the polo.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense, man. I feel your pain. I've done it before.
Everybody wonders, like, do the anchors wear shorts under, on TV? And like, there are exceptions. And this week, the exception. And we're going to do it. I know some guys, they have a studio now where you see head to toe. And while it may look really nice for all the viewers out there, just know that all the anchors that have to, front all their stories with the full body shot, they hate it.
They hate their life.
You can't have shorts day.
Kevin, I'm curious. I know the 100-degree streak is supposed to break by Friday, but not by much. Do you think we're going to see any changes in the schedule in Lincoln for high school football this week, or are they going to try and push through?
I think they're going to try to push through. If anything, those games might be moved back from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. But I think that the break in the weather, if it holds as forecasted right now, they've pretty much wiped out every game in our area for Thursday night, and that's a wise choice because Thursday is going to be still oppressively warm. So right now it's all for Friday. I'm surprised as they've moved games that no one has scheduled a game for Saturday because it's a pretty open day. But right now it looks like it's game on for everything on Friday night.
Kevin Sjuts, man, we appreciate it. Always love talking to you on Wednesday. We will talk again in a couple of weeks, which will follow Minnesota's and Nebraska's first game.
It's here. Can't wait.
Kevin Sjuts. Enjoy the day, man.
You well, guys.
He's the sports director at 1011 now. Kevin Sjuts at Kevin Sjuts on Twitter. That's SJUTS. When we come back, Paul Keels, play-by-play voice of Ohio State football. We'll talk Ted Carter. We'll talk quarterback situation. All next.
The show will be back in 4 minutes. The show will be back in 3 minutes. The show will be back in 2 minutes. The show will be back in 1 minute. The show will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Back to pass, sets it as 35, fires down the right sideline. Harrison got it inside the 20. Harrison all the way to the house for Ohio State. Marvin Harrison catches the pass from C.J. Stroud. Johnson wide to the right to the 40. Johnson hits the 50-yard line. He's at the Indiana 40. Cuts back to the middle behind blockers to the 30. Johnson weaves his way to the 20 of Indiana. Behind blockers to the 10 and into the end zone goes Xavier Johnson. 71 yards to the house.
Man, I'm sure Paul wouldn't mind saying that a couple more times. Paul Keels, play-by-play voice of Ohio State football, with us now at Paul Keels on Twitter. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Good, man. You know, I love having you on just to hear your voice. Like, it's kind of weird to say, and I know that sounds weird, but like, you just have such an iconic play-by-play voice. It's good to hear from you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys saying that.
Hey, you know, we talked about this on the show yesterday. And, you know, I'm kind of curious about the feelings out there at The Ohio State University. Are you at all concerned that Kyle McCord hasn't secured the job yet?
Not overly. It was kind of anticipated that this would be a pretty close battle, but there's a lot of unknowns. Kyle McCord is a known. He's played in a number of games. He actually has a start. We've been able to see more of him in game situations. Also, you know, another X factor is he was a high school teammate of Marvin Harrison. Now, Devin Brown came in with a lot of great credentials from high school. People really liked the potential of what he could do. He only played in 2 games last year, and he didn't attempt to pass. And as far as the stuff that was open for us media people able to watch, it's been hard to get any real definitive feeling about it. Plus, add the fact that he did not play in the spring game because of a finger injury. So I think there's not really a concern that Kyle McCord hasn't done it. More than anything, it probably gives you the idea that, you know, Devin Brown has really impressed people. But we're guessing. We don't know.
Paul, are you still kind of under the assumption that it will be Kyler McCord at least to start the year because he does have that a little bit of experience you were talking about, or do you still feel like it's truly up in the air?
I feel like it's truly up in the air. Now, that experience could be a determining factor. And, here's the other part that goes into play just when you're speculating about it. When you think about playing Indiana, you think about playing Youngstown State and Western Kentucky in the first 3 games, it's kind of safe to think that they both were going to play anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is going to be who's going to be the first one to take a snap to run the first series. But again, it's been the most popular question around here, but there's no answer to it at this point.
Paul, do you think Ryan Day embraces the fact that people around college football, or at least in the Big Ten, would count him second behind Jim Harbaugh in regards to, like, if we were starting a team from scratch, who would you want to be your coach? People right now are leaning Harbaugh, but then you look at Day's stats and you're like, wait a second, he's only had like 6 losses in his entire career coaching in Ohio State. And do you think that because he kind of embraces that underdog mentality, it puts Ohio State in a good position every year to be successful?
Well, I don't know if I'd say he embraces the underdog mentality, and certainly coaches don't worry about what other people think about them in relation to other coaches. But, to kind of answer your question, it burns with him that they've lost to Michigan 2 years in a row, that they lost to Georgia in the playoffs, and the way they lost by giving up big plays when seemingly they had improved on some things. So it's a motivating factor. Probably push come to shove, Ryan Day would tell you it's understandable why people are looking at Michigan as the favorite to win the Big Ten again, because they've done it the last 2 years. That is a game that really affects people's lives around here, especially when it doesn't go well. And, coupled with the fact that for 7 years prior to that, Ohio State dominated the series.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's kind of been their rallying cry. They know that they let things get away, that, one play away from playing for a national championship game, if things go different in the Georgia game, and being beaten by Michigan in Columbus the way they were. So it certainly is something that motivates them.
And this year's schedule presents a major challenge for Ohio State, because if you look at the win total that they're given, it's 10.5, which is right on point with the Michigan of the world. But then you look at who Ohio State actually has to play, right? You play Notre Dame, who's a ranked team to start the year, Penn State, who's in the top 10. Then you go on and play Wisconsin, who's a ranked team to start the year, Michigan to close the year. I mean, this is a daunting schedule for a newly led, and I say newly led based on what I mean by quarterback, a team at Ohio State.
Well, when you think about going on the road to South Bend, going on the road to Madison, and then going on the road to Ann Arbor, those are dangerous opportunities. And not to mention opening the season on the road against a conference opponent in Indiana. So it is that from a football team standpoint, they're focused on week 1. And you hear coaches say that all of the time, but they know that whatever they do this summer, as far as getting the right attitude, the right toughness, it's going to be the kind of things that have to prepare them to go into those places like South Bend and Madison and Ann Arbor and have a chance to win.
Paul, I'm curious. Obviously, the quarterback spot gets a lot of the attention, but another question on offense for Ohio State is that offensive line, where they're replacing 3 starters that went on to be NFL draft picks at tackle and at center. Where do you think the offensive line is, and how much of a question mark is it for Ohio State going into this year?
That's probably the second biggest question outside of the quarterback. Now, from what we hear from summer practice, they like how guys have competed for that. They brought in a transfer from San Diego State, Josh Simmons, who's played a lot of football. So they feel as though they've got some guys there that have created a great competitive atmosphere to push one another forward to play well. The other thing that ties into that, there's a really good feeling about what they have at running back. They've got 4 guys that at various times last year produced at a high level, and a 5th that's a very talented guy coming back off of injury. So there's the hope that the talented running back and, the feeling that this offensive line will get some traction, that those are the kind of things, as well as a talented receiver group that will help whoever the quarterback is get settled into things.
Paul, and flip to the defensive side for me, because whenever somebody talks about Ohio State, it's normally they're talking about the high-powered offense the Buckeyes bring. And it's not like there isn't talent on the defensive side of the ball, but if you look at just the past 2 drafts, 10 Buckeyes were taken in the first round, or not first round, 10 Buckeyes, offensive players were selected, and just 2 were taken on the defensive side of the ball. But as you look at the defense this season. Are they rock steady? Do you think that this is going to be another really good Ohio State defense like we saw last year, which was 13th in the nation in total defense, 24th in scoring defense, and on and on and on and on?
Well, there's a lot of reason to be encouraged about what they can do, given the fact that they've got the experience coming back and some crucial additions, especially in the back end with a couple of transfers, and Jahad Carter from Syracuse and Davison Igbinosun at Ole Miss. But really what it's going to come down to is limiting those explosive plays, which for the most part they did a very good job last year up until the last two games. Those were what cost them those games. This defense has playmakers at linebacker. They've got depth at the defensive line and players on the back end that have played a lot of football. But it's going to come down to, can they make the plays when they really need to at a crucial point in time? It's the second year with Jim Knowles as a defensive coordinator. Hopefully there's some familiarity from coach to player and vice versa. It also sounds as though maybe they've simplified the things a little bit and not given them too much to have to noodle on. So there's a lot of reason to be encouraged that this defense could play at a high level, but can they do it against the best competition? That's what we're all anxious to see.
Paul, if this team is able to get back over the hump against Michigan and make another college football playoff and perhaps get over the hump there as well, what to you is the biggest wild card that will have to work out in order for that to happen?
Probably what we were just talking about defensively. If they're able to, limit big plays, if they're able to force turnovers, if they're able to really kind of shackle opposing offenses and, box them in certain situations, that's because there is a feeling that regardless of who the quarterback's going to be, that it's an offense that has some weapons, whether it's, Marvin Harrison, the receivers, or the group of running backs. But defensively, if they can take the steps in the big games, that would be kind of the X factor to take this team to that level.
Paul, who are some key transfers this season for Ohio State, or maybe a guy to watch out for that did transfer in? And then who would you say is somebody that Ohio State lost that may emerge with a different team across college football?
Well, as far as who they lost, C.J. Stroud to the NFL. That's going to be the biggest difference. As far as the transfers, and we kind of mentioned some of them, Josh Simmons on the offensive line at tackle is a guy that really is going to be a big part of that. Tywan Mullen, a defensive lineman that came from Ole Miss. And here's a guy that when he was at Ole Miss, he played both football and baseball. He's now focusing on just football. And he's a guy that was recruited by Ohio State out of high school. So, he's kind of been someone that's been on their radar quite a bit. But the two guys in the secondary that we mentioned, Davison Igbinosun at corner and Jahad Carter at safety, if those guys can help tighten up the back end of the defense, those are two guys that can really have a big influence on what happens.
Paul, I'm curious on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Ohio State had a really great run of having the Bosas and Chase Young on that defensive line as really disruptive players. Is there anybody in that defensive line group this year that has some serious disruptive potential to kind of aid in what you were talking about being a big playmaking defense?
There's a couple of guys to keep an eye on, and both of them are defensive ends, and both of them have flashed and had big moments at times, but what this coaching staff is looking for from them is consistency. Jack Sawyer at one defensive end, he's a young man that he's a local kid from the Columbus area, and he did not play his senior year of high school football just to be ready for college, and kind of seemingly is caught up now. They were using him a little bit in a hybrid position last year. He settled in more on defensive end. He's a guy that could be a disruptor. And Jalen Tuimoloau, another defensive end who just had a career in one game last year against Penn State. He had a couple of touchdowns, a pick six, he had multiple sacks. But consistency is what they're looking for from both Jalen Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. Those are guys that, hopefully, and everybody's kind of eyeballing them to see if they could play at the level of Chase Young and the Bosa brothers.
Paul, quickly here, I can't believe I forgot to bring this up. What do you guys think of Ted Carter, or acquiring Ted Carter over there at Ohio State?
Maybe you can fill it in. We're just trying to figure that out. It just came out yesterday, so who knows?
He's a good get for you guys. I think he'll do wonders for your program. Thanks for the time.
My pleasure, guys. Take care.
All right, when we come back, we will change gears and talk to Cynthia Frelund, NFL analytics expert at C Frelund on Twitter. That was Paul Keels, play-by-play voice of Ohio State, at Paul Keels on Twitter. All right, NFL talk when we come back here on Coffee and Cream.
We'll be right back in 4 minutes.
we got to get a lot done the next 2 weeks. I think this is when the speed kind of amps up a little bit. Urgency amps up. Today was a good example of that. We got to go against the Carter period. That's when everything's up. And there's going to be quick signals and new stuff and more variation in the cadence and more quick adjustments. So there's going to be some mistakes, but we got to learn from every single one of those. And there's not a wasted rep, whether we're in the walkthrough in the indoor before or out on the field here. We got to get make every rep count. We got to get a lot done the next 2 weeks. I think this is when the speed kind of amps up a little.
We'll be right back in 2 minutes. We'll be right back in 1 minute. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Top of the hour here on Coffee and Cream. Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers. Happy to be with you this morning on ESPN Radio 590 in Omaha. We are live on Twitter, live on YouTube, the Hurrdat Sports YouTube page. We're also now on KFOR in Lincoln for this hour, so we appreciate all of you joining us out there. We're just really excited to be here and doing the show with you today. Now, Ravi, as we wait to talk a little bit of NFL with Cynthia Frelund, who will be coming our way, I don't know if you've had any issue with your car lately, but I am in desperate, and I mean desperate, need of an oil change. So I'm taking my car over to Dingman's. Dingman's is here for me, just like we are here for everybody else. Dingman's is there for me when I need them most. They have 4 great locations, and they do more than just oil changes, right? They'll fix up your car, any problem you have. They work on all makes and models from Fords to Teslas. They will take care of you. They have some awesome give back programs as well, including one, Epic for Girls, Collective for Hope, Community Alliance, just all 3 that you can choose to donate to after you get your car serviced at Dingman's, and they'll do the donation. So you don't even have to put your own money forth. Dingman's will do it for you, but you get the choice of who you are going to donate to, what nonprofit is available. If you have a problem with your car, that's Dingman's Collision Center, dingmans.com. Ravi, as I thought a little bit more, are you about the NFL season?
Mm-hmm.
Should finish my sentence there. Are you a Hard Knocks guy?
Off and on, I am not a diehard, like watch it the first second it comes out, but I'll binge a couple episodes at a time and kind of catch up on what's going on.
Got to be honest, not me.
Yeah.
Not me. I haven't really gotten into it. Shane, let's bring on Cynthia now as she joins the show. Cynthia Frelund, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Hopefully we're bringing the energy for you today on a Wednesday. How are things?
Pretty good, thank you. How about you?
Things are good. 8 days away from college football for us, so we are really vibing here in Nebraska, but we haven't gotten to talk a lot about the NFL season just yet. So we chatted with Shane yesterday, and we're like, we have to bring Cynthia back on. We have to get her back in the
Love
chair.
It.
I
love Nebraska's coach, right? I'm a big Matt Rule fan.
That I do.
I'm all in on Matt Rule.
Okay, so speaking of Coach Rule, what would be like if you could set expectations for him this season? Like if he could cap somewhere for you, what would be a good first season for Matt Rule?
I think like after watching Nebraska for kind of a long time now, I'm from Big Ten country, and I know that Nebraska wasn't always in the Big Ten, but recently it has been. But ultimately, it's been those weird seasons where you've had like wild swings where it's just been so like bipolar almost, right? Like you start off with these expectations, or you start off with none, and then you start winning, and then it's just terrible. Like it goes back and forth. I think maybe so like strong, steady, maybe not winning all of the games, but playing in each one, contending, being a part of each, really establishing this strong base, because it is very hard, especially in the changing Big Ten, to like keep being strong and good and recruiting constantly and re-recruiting and getting the transfer portal and NIL and all this stuff. So I think just having a nice organized, like some good solid wins and, not having those weird, strange moments of confusion.
Cynthia, I'm curious, you mentioned you're a big Matt Rule fan, and obviously things didn't work out for him in the NFL the way that I'm sure him and Carolina both would have liked. I know you're big on, the math and the numbers and the data analysis of the NFL. When you're looking at these guys that come from college to the NFL, how challenging is it for you to try and figure out from kind of an analytical standpoint what level of success they might have?
Well, it's interesting because the college game has now changed more than, it's always been different, right? But now you're seeing like the way O-lines play and the way quarterbacks play. Like, I do the East-West Shrine Bowl every year. And one of the things that is always fascinating to me is that the quarterbacks, even these are guys like all-stars, right? They don't know how to take like under center snaps, right? So it's just different. So the skill players are, I'm not going to say easy, but easier. And the pass rushers are easier to forecast. But if figuring out quarterback science were an easy thing, then we would have, there'd be no turnover at any of these. There'd be no jobs. There's a whole industry on getting the quarterback right.
Cynthia, we'll jump into the NFL now, or at least away from Matt Rule, I should say, and talk about the big news that Jonathan Taylor he was granted permission to seek a trade. Why do you think the Colts ultimately let this happen? Is it because they saw what Lamar Jackson did and they're like, you're not going anywhere?
Well, two things. Number one, Mr. Irsay has come out and said like that the market is kind of a little nuts. And he's not wrong. The overall cap's gone up between 8 and 9%, and quarterbacks have gone up between 60, like double that, right? So they're outpacing. So somebody has to get squeezed. And ultimately, when that's happening, and running backs are this thing where, they unfortunately, at 28, like look at Dalvin Cook, like the Vikings were fine letting him go, and he was kind of in his prime. So the truth is the market isn't strong for running backs right now. And I think that the Colts are in a position where, they have a rookie quarterback. Maybe they don't have big expectations this season. The AFC is pretty much a huge nightmare, just top to bottom. It's so much stronger than the NFC. So I think they're probably saying, okay, well, we're not going to give you this monstrous contract. We have to build for the future, and we got to get quarterback right first. We fired everyone, you know, we not the GM, but we fired the coach and all the staff there, and now we're going to restart. So I don't think it's as personal as it feels, but I think Jonathan Taylor clearly wasn't happy, and they just decided, like, we're not building around a running back. We're going to build around, we have to figure out like a lot of other pieces too.
Cynthia, I'm curious. I know you do your projections on all these different players in the NFL, and specifically with the running backs, like you were talking about. You know, it seems like after age 27, 28, these guys start to have some pretty serious attrition in their careers. How do you factor that into your projections with a guy? And, you know, just from your projections, Derrick Henry, 29 years old, you expect him to lead the league in touchdowns. Nick Chubb, 27-year-old, you expect him to lead the league in rushing yards. Both of those guys are kind of on that precipice of, you know, that 28 to 30 range where we see running backs start to fall off. How do you factor that in there?
You know, it's interesting because, like, Derrick Henry, remember coming out of Alabama, people were like, he has run for 1,600 billion trillion yards and there's no tread left on that tire. And, you know, he really, remember that?
Yeah.
He really proved people wrong. But the truth is it kind of comes down to the individual. I mean, his training regimen is out of control. The fact that he was injury-free for so long was lucky, but also you saw him return. Like, he's going to be in, you know, I believe he'll get himself into great shape like every single season. So, you know, the truth is it kind of depends on the individual because they do sustain a lot of wear and tear. But guys like Nick Chubb and guys like Derrick Henry, who are truly, you know, not only just taking care of themselves, but also their teams are trying to, I mean, the Browns have one of the best O-lines in football, so that helps considerably. But also, like, they try to run different schemes so that, you know, like we saw Derrick Henry last season have like he started to catch passes. Like he has like a career high, like 33 receptions last season. So they're trying to do different things, and that will keep a running back rejuvenated as well.
Cynthia, another reason I like talking to you around this time of year is because of your fantasy advice and the numbers that you put out. And there's a lot of fantasy football players out there in the world. So I got a question for you. I want you to find 4 players for me. Cynthia Frelund's breakout player, your bust, your overhyped player, and your undervalued player this season.
Okay, so I'm going to go with Calvin Ridley as my breakout player. I think he's got a lot to prove, you know, in Jacksonville, and Trevor Lawrence will look for him because he's a really precise route runner. And I have a lot of questions about their defense, which means I think that they're going to be throwing the ball quite a bit. Number one. Okay, so you said breakout, and then you said what was the next one? Sorry.
Bust. No, you're good.
The problem with, I think Jonathan Taylor's my bust. I don't know where people are drafting him now. It just feels like one of those things where you're going to take a flyer on him and just be like, like it's just not going to be great. So that's probably, I would say that. Just don't, you know, this is a guy who expects to finish like top 5, and I don't think that that's going to be the case. I guess, you know, we've got to see where his new home is, or if he stays in India, who knows. But I'm staying away from that situation. My overhyped player, I think we got to be careful about Bijan Robinson. Right now, he's trading as the 3rd running back off the board.
Yeah, that's
RB
crazy.
Number 3. That's way too high. And it's not that I don't like him. It's not that I don't think this time next year we should be talking about him in that same vein, because he's awesome and he's a pass catcher, which you need in PPR. But the truth is he's still a rookie. So, like, you're telling me that the only guys in the league that are going to score more fantasy points than a rookie are, you know, 2 guys, Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. I mean, that's, to me, that's just a little too overhyped.
Cynthia, I'm glad you brought up Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, I'm a 49ers fan, so I appreciate that. But I'm curious, with his injury history, do you have any hesitation at all in terms of his fantasy projections? Obviously, if he's healthy, he's going to put up a ton of points for you. But do you have any bit of concern about, after finally staying healthy last year, that he's able to do that for 2 years in a row?
I mean, their O-line didn't get better. You know, like, it's not that my problem with any type of running back first, like, I always kind of hope that I'm drafting like 5 to 8, right? Like, that's my sweet spot. right? Because I don't want to have to make that decision.
Right.
You know, like I'm like, somebody make that decision for me so that it's not like on my conscience, right? So, you know,
because you don't want to pass on him, right?
No, I won't pass on him.
Then it turns into a panic pick. Yep.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, like I kind of just wish that it would like, you know, you know, to me, like I'd rather like I'm trying to get like 5 or 6 in all my drafts and like hope that Travis Kelce is there because I like my strategy of like Travis Kelce and then come around the second. Nick Chubb for whatever reason has dropped down below like he's like running back 7. I'm like, fine, give me Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I love that.
Gucci, right? You know, like I don't know how that happened, but so it's like I'd rather do something where I feel like I'm getting a lot of upside because I'm not going to pass on him, and you can't. He's like so valuable, but on some level, like it's just I don't know. Like I get fearful of it because that could be your whole season in one injury.
Speaking of running back, Cynthia, which running back that relocated will have a bigger year, Miles Sanders or DeAndre Swift?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that Swift is probably the guy that they're looking to be what they were using Miles Sanders for. If
right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think that because Miles Sanders has both Deuce Staley and a rookie quarterback, that he'll probably get more run. So while I like I think it's in terms of like, you know, if you're an Eagles fan, you should be very excited about DeAndre Swift. I think that he'll look like a different guy. I actually think Miles Sanders will be that like that workhorse, like the volume will be there. So, you know, with a rookie quarterback, they've got a decent O-line. With a rookie quarterback, I just feel like that Deuce Staley, and remember, I say Deuce Staley because if you think about what made the Lions running backs, which it gets confusing because that was DeAndre Swift, right? But what made like Jamal Williams so good, Deuce Staley was there architecting that. So what you have is you have now like a really smart, fun guy that people love to work for. So that's kind of why I think maybe Deuce will have the bigger year. But I think both, to me, it's like, you know, potato. It's in terms of fantasy points.
Cynthia, I'm curious. You mentioned Travis Kelce as kind of the guy you like to take mid-first round. Is that because, I mean, obviously his overall production is great, but how much do you consider his value over the next available tight end? How does that factor into your decision-making process?
That's my number one reason for taking him first. Like, yes, I hate the tight end position because if you miss out on the top 3 guys, like you're kind of like then it's like constantly this thing where you're like, oh, this problem again. But you know, but it's interesting because to me when I project out all the points for, you know, what's the difference between running back 1 and running back 2? It's like 11 points. What's the difference between wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2? It's like 10 points. And then same thing for quarterbacks. It's like, you know, maybe 11 points. It's very tight. Then you look at for tight end, it's like 60 points. So it's the next available option is just and that's between 1 and 2 even.
Yeah.
Right. Like not even 1 and, you know, 5. So it's just crazy.
Cynthia, do you think Darren Waller is poised to have a bounce back season?
Well, I kind of feel about Waller the same way I feel about, you asked about Christian McCaffrey. I mean, Waller has had injuries too. So I think he is poised, like he's in a great position to have a breakout year, but if you're overdrafting him, you're going to feel bad about it. So it's, you know, like it's the same thing. So if he falls to you in like that tight end 6 to 7 range, then great. But if not, then you could be overextending for your fantasy. But for real football purposes, I think he'll be very valuable. For fantasy football purposes, I do get a little fearful of, you know, anyone who's had injuries again.
What about Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, I mean injury too, but like I think we were a year too early on the Kyle Pitts hype train. I think this season will be a much better year for them in general. Because remember, he like couldn't get in the end zone. He was super valuable despite not getting in the end zone, and like somehow now he's like not as valuable as he was a year ago. I don't understand how that all works. This team has the Falcons have one of the best O-lines in all of football. I don't know what to make of Desmond Ridder, but I do know that between Drake London and Kyle Pitts and this young staff and Bijan Robinson, and by the way, when Cordero Patterson comes back, and Tyler Algier, they're going to have like this short yardage game down. So I think that Kyle Pitts will be very valuable.
Cynthia, I'm curious what your quarterback strategy is. Kind of where's the earliest you would feel comfortable taking one? And let's say you miss out on the top couple of guys like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, those types of guys. Who's kind of in that next tier if you decide to wait on a quarterback?
Well, I'm trying to get a lot, all right, so there's a couple strategies I think. The first is I have a couple of leagues where I like to be me, meaning I know that some of my friends are big Chiefs fans. So it's pretty funny to take Patrick Mahomes with all your friends.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So there's that, because you got to remember, it's a long season. So sometimes, having a little burr in your friend's side is, very fun, right? So, there's that. And I do that with, I do preseason with the Bills. So, I have a number of Bills fans as well. So, great. Patrick or Josh, fine. I'll take, give me both of them. But in my leagues, with our NFL Fantasy Live league and stuff, I'm kind of trying to target Trevor Lawrence this year because I think I'll be able to get him a little lower. I know Rank will want Justin Fields. I really think about my opponents a lot with quarterback strategy because I think that that's a good way to kind of anticipate when they're going to make their picks. Because it doesn't the truth is people say, don't wait, go in the later rounds. Well, you can go in the later rounds if the other people in your league are going in the later rounds, right? The difference between quarterback 1 and quarterback 10 annually, sometimes there's guys who are outliers on the top, but there's a real cluster of quarterbacks between 2 and 6. So it's not that different. But if people are drafting those guys in the third round, then maybe you take them in the third round, right? So it's less about kind of which round and more about where the opponents in your league are taking them. So to me, it's all right, I got a few guys that I'd like to take. If there's an early run, I don't care. And I'll have to look at the available substitutes. But the truth is you don't want to get too far down the list because you don't want to sit there and be oh, God, I have to roll Kirk Cousins today. This is not going to happen.
Say less. Say less, Cynthia. I feel like I'm always rolling with Kirk Cousins in one league, and I'm just crying myself to sleep.
And you're really this again? And you're but then I got Justin Jefferson. So it's
yeah. We have the team. We pair them up. Yeah.
And you're oh, this is terrible. This is way too much exposure to the Vikings. Something like that. Well, we got it.
It's so funny. I would hate to play fantasy with Cynthia. Not only is she so much smarter than me, but if she took Justin Fields from me, I'd probably cry. I would probably cry just because she knows I'm a Bears fan.
Well, it's funny because I'll be in Chicago for the Bills game this weekend for the preseason game, and it's funny because we play with the analytics people from different teams. We all play together, and truly before each other's picks, people the Jags guy picks picks before the Giants guy and steals Saquon Barkley. There's it's hilarious. Every single time it makes me laugh so hard because it's this guy will steal this and this, and I mean. People at first, people are oh, are we going to give away inside information? I'm what are you talking about? They just want to beat each other.
Man. Cynthia Frelund, NFL analytics expert with us right now. A couple more questions. I want to jump back into football. So outside of the fantasy mind and back into legitimate football conversation, we on the show, I think about a month ago, maybe it was 2, I was talking with DB, and I had before Anthony Richardson was named the starting quarterback, I said he's going to win Rookie of the Year. And he kind of looked at me sideways a little bit. And now I'm kind of curious that he is the starting quarterback. In your mind, who wins Rookie of the Year? Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, or Anthony Richardson?
What, can I go off that list?
You could, yeah, go off the list.
I think it's going to be Bijan.
Oh,
I think Bijan will win it.
Okay.
But I like your Anthony Richardson. I was at when he started. It was at the Bills, and again, I do the Bills preseason, so it was really fun to actually see him run that close, right? You watch it on TV and you're oh, he looks fast, and then you watch him in person, you're oh, wow, okay, that's really fast. You're oh, he is fast and quick, both of them. So what I really have a lot of respect for his athleticism, and I think that Shane Steichen will figure out a way to make him look awesome, but I don't really like the unrest that's going on there right now, right? It's kind of unfortunate for a guy who's only had 13 starts in college that, that whole Jonathan Taylor situation we were talking about is going on because that just stinks for him, right? It just makes it harder because now you're trying to figure out, like, is he coming back? Is he not coming back? Is this this? Is this that? It's very distracting.
Cynthia, I'm curious, we've brought up Jonathan Taylor's name a couple times here, but who do you think would be the best fit? Like, where makes the most sense for Jonathan Taylor to end up? Like, if you're in an NFL front office and you're looking at your roster, which team do you say, hey, we are significantly better if we go out and get Jonathan Taylor?
I mean, I think the Dolphins at this point are kind of like one of the places you could look to because of, the ability of that coaching staff to leverage his type of skill. But, we talked about Dalvin Cook as a potential landing spot for them too. However, one of my colleagues, Tom Pelissero, reported that the Colts are trying to ask for more than Christian McCaffrey got in return. So I don't think it's, I'm going to do like an asterisk there and say talent-wise, the Dolphins, I don't know if it's worth giving up all of that for a guy who Christian McCaffrey wasn't like demanding this trade, right? Yet, like, sure, he's had a bunch of, injuries. He didn't, I don't know, like, force this. It feels weird to force this when you're not, it's not like he's this veteran player. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels icky to me. Like a little too, like, I know egos and I know that their lifespan is short and I understand, but like, I don't know, it just feels a little weird to me.
Cynthia, got about 40 seconds here. Quick one. Which team in 2023 do you think makes the biggest jump from last year?
The Falcons. I think they go from worst to first in their division, but I also like the Seahawks.
All right.
Okay. Well, the Seahawks, I mean, they were competitive last year, so that's a good pick too.
I think, yeah. I mean, if you're going to pick like outside the box Super Bowl situation, anyone in the NFC that makes it to the playoffs has a much better chance. Just think about it, because the AFC, you make it to the playoffs, you got to play all of the hardest quarterbacks.
Yeah.
The NFC, you make it to the playoffs, and it's still not that bad.
Gosh, very true. I could talk to you like for the rest of this hour, but unfortunately, we got to let you go. Thanks for the time.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back with a little bit of Creighton talk next.
We will be back in 5 minutes. We will be back in 4 minutes. We will be back in 3 minutes. We will be back in 2 minutes. We will be back in 1 minute. We will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
All right, welcome back, Coffee and Cream. Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers, as we start to wind this thing down on a Wednesday, talking a little Creighton basketball because they are national title contenders, according to one of our good friends on the show, John Fanta. He put out his list, and it's a list of that's separated like tier 1 and tier 2, and he's got the ones that are best set up for success, and then he's got the next tier, which is more like the capable ones, like the ones that are like really capable to be able to get it done.
It's like no questions about those guys, yeah.
And then the tier 3 teams are just like, I like these guys, but I also need to figure out a few more things before I say, like, yes, you're up in the tier 2 category. But if you look at where he put Creighton, he put them next to some Big East teams. Not only did he put them next to UConn and Marquette, but he also has them with like an Arkansas of the world. And you remember how Arkansas played out a little bit last season. And then you have they kind of fall more into the question marks, though, right? Because they're the ones that are like, okay, last year, and this is funny because when you said you wanted to talk about this, I chuckled when I was doing my research because I'm like, they're exactly where they were last year. Like last year, they were a preseason top 10, but they were 25-1 to win, or 200. Is it 250-1, 25-1?
I think 25-1.
25-1 to win. The national championship. You look at them today, and they're 25-1 to win the national championship. So Vegas is like, they're pretty much the same team, right? They run through Ryan Kalkbrenner, even though they lost Nemhard. They got Ashworth, who is an upgrade in his own way. You lose Kaluma, but then you get Trout, and Trout is an upgrade in his own way.
And you've still got Miller,
right,
that can provide some of the minutes there.
So you look at Creighton's team this year, and they're coming off a close finish in the Elite Eight last season. You're like, okay, I could see them making a run, especially if they get placed well in the national tournament, but that's so far away that we don't even need to talk about that right now. But it is interesting to kind of see this list come out and also just focus on who else is there with Creighton, because when you take a peek at Marquette, who may be a step up than Creighton, probably is when you take a look at UConn, who is a reigning national champion. So they're already a step up above Creighton in this category too. The Big East is a monster, an absolute monster.
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple of things I found interesting about this list. And so to give context, yes, Creighton is in tier 3 of this list, but these are
tier 3. Did I say they were in tier 2?
No, you said tier 3, but it's tier 3 of the 12 teams he thinks can win a national championship. So tier 3 is still a nice place to be. And I honestly, it's kind of funny because I get UConn gets the benefit of the doubt because they're coming off of a national title, but they're replacing.
They lost some pieces.
Obviously Sonogo and Hawkins, which are 2 huge pieces. Definitely bigger departures than the ones Creighton is dealing with. Both guys, Sonogo was Big East Player of the Year. I believe Sonogo. No, Kolek was Big East Player of the Year. Sonogo was in the running for Big East Player. It was, I think, preseason Big East Player of the Year.
Right.
Hawkins was first-round draft pick. And then with Marquette, you lost another first-round draft pick in Olivier Maxence Prosper. I'm curious if Tyler Kolek comes back to earth at all. The year before, he was mediocre. Last year, obviously, he was really, really good, Big East Player of the Year, and was incredibly efficient with his assist to turnovers. I wonder, with the scouting report out there with him now and kind of people knowing that the offense is going to be really focused on him, how much he's able to sustain or improve on that.
And he teams up with Cam Jones, who's a beast.
Yep, Cam Jones is really good. I do think the loss of Prosper is a really big deal, and people are kind of just overlooking that because Kolek and Jones are coming back along with Iguodaro.
Is it easy to overlook that because Shaka Smart is the head coach?
It probably is. Like, Shaka Smart probably gets more of a benefit of the doubt maybe than Greg McDermott does,
especially because of how strong they were last year.
Yeah, and
the momentum they built.
And Shaka's kind of got that. He's more of a celebrity coach figure than Greg McDermott is, even though McDermott's success and sustainability at Creighton has been unbelievable and frankly unmatched. Yeah. So Marquette and UConn, I think, have just as many questions as Creighton. Marquette, for instance, kind of flamed out in the NCAA tournament last year, whereas Creighton, I was trying to be gracious, whereas Creighton really excelled. So you look at that. I totally understand why UConn's a tier up above Creighton because you've got defending national champs. You give them a little benefit of the doubt. Totally get that. I'm not as sure why Creighton's getting why Marquette's getting more of a benefit of the doubt than Creighton, considering they do lose a major piece and did flame out in the NCAA tournament where Creighton didn't. Creighton returned all their most important pieces. Let's be clear here. Alexander and Kalkbrenner were the 2 guys for me that were non-negotiable for Creighton to get back if they were going to have a successful year this year.
And they got them both.
At least in that level. And surprisingly, in my mind at least, I didn't think Shireman was probably coming back for the extra year. Got him back. And then they got basically, I understand you can make an argument that Nembhard and Kaluma may have more talent than an Ashworth and a Trout, although I think it's probably close between Trout and Kaluma. But I don't think you can argue that they were better fits for Creighton. Even John Fanta mentions that with Ashworth in his piece.
It's all about the fit.
He says the fit might be an upgrade with Ashworth at point guard. And not only because of his skill set, but also because his skill set allows for Alexander and Shireman to become more on-ball playmakers. That's the thing, the versatility in the offensive playmakers. That's the thing that I think held Creighton back a little bit last year offensively, and I think they could take a step forward there this year.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing up fit because that's the big thing here. Because last year, what it seemed like it was, okay, Nembhard has the ball. He's probably either scoring or it's getting to Kalkbrenner. Okay, Alexander has the ball. He's probably creating for himself and he's doing a pull-up. Okay, Shireman gets the ball. Okay, it's a 3. But you know what it seemed like? It was kind of like everybody had to have their turn. I wanted some cake too, right?
It didn't flow naturally
it didn't
quite
seem
as well.
Like, hey, we're finding the best look. It was like, no, now it's my turn. And now that they've built the team that they have this year, it seems like because they went for fit instead of just pure talent. And I'm not knocking Ashworth and I'm not knocking Trout. I'm just comparing them to where Kaluma and Nembhard were last year. Now that they have the bodies that they do, it's like you may see some well put together basketball, a lot of ball movement, looking for eating a lot of the shot clock, but then when you eat the shot clock, you're still finding the open shot, or, you're moving the defense all around to where you can feed the ball inside, back out, back inside. And now instead of a 1-on-2 with Kalk, it's a 1-on-1 as he's backing down his defender, or he dishes it back out and you have the open look from 3, or you have Ashworth driving because what he does best is drive and dish, or by just doing a quick pass when he gets the ball, he just moves it on.
Yeah, he's a good spot up shooter too.
So there's just a lot of stuff to like about Creighton this year.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a lot less of a ball stopping offense, whereas most everything that was run out of Creighton last year started with a Nembhard high pick and roll, right? And while he was very good at that, and while Creighton still had a fairly successful offense, that's easier to defend than if you've got 3 different guys in Ashworth, Alexander, and Shireman that can all create offense for both themselves and the rest of the team. The best Creighton offense, or at least the most difficult Creighton offense to guard in my lifetime, was that 2019-2020 season Nicholas Allen Baugh, where they had Tyshawn Alexander, Marcus Zagorowski, and Mitch Ballack all as playmakers for themselves and others, because you couldn't just key on Marcus Zagorowski as the point guard. You couldn't just key on Tyshawn Alexander as a primary ball handler. You had 3 guys that were equally comfortable with the ball, creating for themselves and creating for others. I don't know if they'll match that level, but what I do know is there will be more offensive, I think diversification's a good word, than you had last year. And the other thing that I think is a huge factor here, the spacing with who you have as Ashworth as a spot-up shooter, Trout and Miller as much better spot-up shooters than Kaluma, is the spacing on this team is going to be significantly better.
And one final note here before we go to break, there's something that through everything that we've been talking about here that really just said, okay, now I think I know the difference from last year and this year. Last year, it was like Shireman comes in and everybody knew he was a shooter. And he felt like he had to get his buckets in order to make a name for himself at Creighton. Everybody knew that Nembhard was going to be the guy to dribble the ball down and work on that pick and roll game. Everybody knew Kalkbrenner had to score in the double digits for this team to be successful. Alexander felt like he was forcing a little bit more last year to try to get his buckets,
find his spots,
so that he could also be up at the same level as Shireman and Nembhard when they're putting points on the board and Kalkbrenner. Now this year, Shireman knows what he's good at, so he's good with creating his own looks. He doesn't have to make a name for himself. Alexander, he can step up and be that guy that everybody has kind of projected him to be. Kalkbrenner can still get his buckets on the inside and be a product for this team. It just seems like they gel more. We're going to play Gone in 60 Seconds when we come back.
We will be back in 4 minutes. We will be back in 3 minutes. We will be back in 2 minutes. We will be back in 1 minute. We will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hurrdat Sports Radio. The time it took you to get your popcorn? 3.2 minutes. Time it took you to upload this podcast? 2.5 minutes. Time Damon has to go rapid fire?
Let's go.
60 seconds.
Oh, it's rapid fire.
It's gone in 60 seconds. But
what a great intro. What a great intro there, Robbie. Okay, gone in 60 seconds. This is a game that, yes, in the intro it says we play with Damon, but today we play with Ravi. Before we do that, I was looking at just the Storm Chasers website the other day, and did you know they already released their 2024 schedule? They did. Unbelievable. 75 home games, 75 road games. That's how they do it over at Werner Park. They'll have the Iowa Cubs, and it seems like they always play the Iowa Cubs. So
they're right down the road there.
Right? That's not too hard to believe, right? But they host Iowa on Easter Sunday, March 31st, Jacksonville on Mother's Day. Then they have Iowa on July 3rd, 4th of July game. And then, you know what? They'll be on the road for Memorial Day, Father's Day, and Independence Day. So you guys, all those fans out there, you can go like to your favorite lake or you can go to a pool with the family. But on those other days, you'll find yourself over at Werner Park, right?
That's right.
Thank you, Ravi. All right, let's do Gone in 60 Seconds. New little prompt today. So last week we did the college football runaround. And actually the week before we did that with you too, where I gave like a quarterback, running back, wide receivers, colleges, and then you had to tell me what team we were talking about. Today it's a little bit different. It's across the board.
Okay.
We have a basketball, we have a football, and we have another basketball.
Okay.
Because that's kind of your forte. So
yeah.
I wanted to kind of stay home with you. Shane, can you put 1 minute on the clock? Oh, it's already up there. Shane's on top of it. Shane, music ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here it is.
Let's get Gone in 60.
You have 60 seconds to name 3 of the top 5 point guards all time in the NBA in career scoring. And go.
Okay, so
start the clock, Shane.
Curry.
Curry is correct. He is 1.
Is
not number 1, but he's
one of 3. Is like Havlicek up there?
He's not.
Okay.
You keep firing them off too.
Chris Paul.
Chris Paul is on the list.
Okay, so I got 2 out of
You have
3.
2 out of 3. One more.
Okay.
Meatloaf said 2 out of 3 wasn't bad.
I'm gonna guess Stockton because he played so long.
Not Stockton.
Okay, he didn't score very much.
2 out of 3 isn't bad.
All right.
seconds.
Let's see. Well, I'll just go through some all-timers. Are we talking like Isaiah Thomas here?
He is not in the top 5.
Magic Johnson?
He is not in the top 5.
Are we counting Dame Lillard?
He is not in the top 5.
Okay. Point guard. Steve Nash?
He is not in the top
Woo!
5. 13 seconds.
It's getting tricky here.
That's Run DMC.
Oh, my bad. Let's see. Point guards. We're not doing like a Mark Jackson, are we? He didn't score very much.
Nope. Get one more guess. Hurry.
I got nothing. Jason Kidd.
Who'd you say?
Jason Kidd.
Jason Kidd is not. 2 out of 3.
Dang.
Oscar Robertson.
Oh, duh. I always forget he was a point guard.
Russell Westbrook.
Oh, gross. That makes me feel dirty.
And Gary Payton.
Oh, Gary Payton surprises me.
So what's funny is you said Paul and Curry. Those are 4 and 5.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Westbrook's actually second on the list.
Really?
In career scoring all time for point guards.
I mean, I guess that makes sense, but man, the Peyton one really surprises me. I should have gotten Westbrook.
You should have gotten Robertson,
and I definitely should have gotten.
About.
I definitely should have gotten Robertson. I was focusing more recent, but man, Peyton surprises me. That's a good one.
So just so you know, you're taking your car over to Dingman's. That's who's our presenting sponsor, because in 60 seconds, you could not make your way to the gas station. Your engine blew, and now you need a new one.
It's true. It's true.
All right. So you feel warmed up?
I think so.
All right.
I think
new
so.
prompt.
Okay.
New prompt. We talked a little fantasy football with Cynthia Frelund.
We
today.
did. Yeah.
Ravi, I know you're not a huge fantasy football player, but you'll do it.
I do play. I do play. Yeah. I don't have 21 teams like our guy the other day had.
Like B.
But yeah.
Okay, here's what I need from you. Name the 3 tight ends that finished in the top of their position group in fantasy football scoring last year. The 3 top tight ends from last year. And go.
Kelsey.
Kelsey is correct.
Was Kittle up there?
Kittle is correct.
I know. Man, this is where it gets tricky. I know Pitts had a lot of yards, but he didn't score that many touchdowns.
And this is total scoring. Pitts is not up there.
Okay. All right. Waller was injured. Gosh, I'm going to miss some obvious ones. Who are we thinking here? Tight end. We're not. I mean, Fant did okay last year. He's not up there, though.
He is not.
I'll
give you a clue. He got traded last year.
He got traded last year.
And not in my fantasy league.
For real
in
traded.
real life. You got 13 seconds.
Oh, man. Who was his old team? Can you tell me that?
NFC North.
NFC North. Who got traded in the NFC North?
And he's still in the NFC North. Got traded to a division rival.
I got nothing.
TJ Hawkinson. An Iowa boy.
I was thinking Iowa guys, and I was like, oh, no, he didn't have that many.
TJ Hawkinson was second
really?
in fantasy points scored for tight ends last year.
All right. Well, I'm nailing these 2s.
Yep.
I've got the 2s.
And you know what you are? 0 for 2.
0 for 2.
0 for 2.
Let's
no
try,
prizes for you.
Let's get this 3rd one. I'm feeling.
You could probably still get over the Dingmans on 2 tires since you just lost 2.
You know what's funny? I thought like those would be like a little bit easier. Like I knew the fantasy football one would be hard. I was kind of going incrementally more difficult for you.
Yeah.
Point guards, all-time career scoring, like NBA's you.
I should have got that
That's
one.
NBA's
that was
you.
a miss.
Then
yeah.
like Kelsey and Kittle, I knew you'd get, but I thought you were going to say like Andrews because Mark Andrews was 4th on that list.
I should have said Andrews.
But it's TJ Hawkinson, so it wouldn't have mattered.
Fellow type 1 diabetic, Mark Andrews. We appreciate that.
This one's probably a little more difficult.
Okay. It's NBA, though?
But it's college basketball.
College basketball,
So
okay.
I think you should be able to do it.
All right.
But 60 seconds to name 8 teams.
8
could be a little difficult.
All right.
8 teams that have won 3 or more national championships in college basketball. Name them all in 60 seconds and go.
Okay, so we got North Carolina.
That's correct.
Duke.
That's correct.
Kentucky.
Yes.
Kansas.
Yes.
UConn.
Yes.
UCLA.
Yes. 2 more.
Does Arizona have 3?
They do not.
They have 2. Okay.
But you're good to just, like I said, rapid fire, 60 seconds.
Okay, I'm thinking Georgetown doesn't have 3. Do they? Does Georgetown?
Nope.
Florida has 2.
That's correct.
Let's see. Come on. Michigan doesn't have 3, do they?
No, they don't. But there is a Big Ten team.
There's another Big Ten team. Who am I? Indiana.
Yep.
One more.
15 seconds.
Purdue. Is there any more Big Ten?
No.
Okay.
This one only has 3.
Only has 3. Oh, come on.
Big East.
I said Big East. Oh no, current Big East or old?
Current.
Louisville. No, that's old.
Dang it, Ravi.
Who is it?
Villanova.
Oh, duh, I'm an idiot. Duh, Nova.
I was jumping out of my seat for you.
I'm happy with 7. I should have got Villanova.
Man,
I should have got Villanova.
I got to tell you, you get all the way to Game 7, but you can't clutch it out.
0 for 3. It's that last one. It's the last one.
It is.
Kills me. I'm
UCLA 11 titles. That was the gimme.
The high one. Yep.
And then of course the Kentuckys, UNC's, the Blue Bloods with Duke, and then UConn as you added in. Indiana was a sleeper there.
Yep.
KU is a good choice with 4.
I should have.
Villanova
got
has
Villanova.
3. How many? How recent have those Villanova?
So
ones
16
been?
and 18, and then 85.
85. Okay.
Yeah, 85 was Raleigh Massimino.
I know. I was trying to time that out well, because when you were like Michigan, I'm like, okay, there's a Big Ten team, so I'm trying to throw in hints because there's 20 seconds left. There's a ton of college basketball.
Yeah, I should have got Villanova there because I'm a big Jay Wright fan. I liked his, but that was yep.
8, but I'm here to challenge.
That was a good one. No, it was good. Those were good prompts. Those were good. I like those.
You're going to go home and just have nightmares.
I am. I'm just going to be like Villanova just floating through my head.
Villanova's, you see the championship run against UNC.
Yep.
The game winning 3.
Chris Jenkins, baby.
And then all of a sudden it's going to transition into Russell Westbrook and his triple-double streak.
Disgusting.
And then you're just going to see a touchdown catch by TJ Hawkinson.
Yep. It's going to haunt my nightmares.
All good. All right, that's gone in 60 seconds today. That was a fun prompt.
Those were good prompts. Those were good prompts. I'm impressed. Those
as I was
quality.
thinking about like what to do, I'm like, okay, so Ravi's a big basketball fan, so that's why I went that direction. But then I wanted to throw in the fantasy football one, and I ran into the issue of it being too easy.
Yeah,
so
tight ends was challenging.
With running backs, I was going to do touchdowns, and just overall in the NFL. And then I'm like, well, I mean, kind of like what we talked about with the college football teams, how you would just think of where a quarterback went.
Yeah.
Use deductive reasoning to decide what team it was.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the same with running backs, because if you just know the top running backs in the league, McCaffrey, Derrick Henry,
Eckler.
Yeah, you could just start naming,
Saquon,
and then you would be done in 10, 15 seconds.
Yeah, you figure it out.
So that's
quick.
why I went with tight ends, though, because a lot of people are like, okay, the first 3.
Yeah.
Or you first 2 tight ends.
First couple, yeah.
And then you're like,
it gets a little tricky after that. Yeah.
I don't know. Well, Ravi, I appreciate you filling in today, man.
And the clock puts pressure on you, man. You like start blanking, and then as soon as it's over, you're like, oh, there's 10 more names I could have tried.
Man, well, thanks for stopping in.
Yeah,
today.
No, this was fun.
Are you stopping in tomorrow?
I don't know. We'll see what time
I guess
DB's
we'll
practicing tomorrow.
All right. Well, if I see you, I see you. If I
see you, I see you.
Good riddance. That's Ravi Lulla. Appreciate you. And we appreciate all of you joining us for today's show, joining in on the comments or calling us on the Warhorse Casino phone line. We are here for you, and we just appreciate all the interaction that we get. So with that, we'll send it away until tomorrow. If you missed anything, go to Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon. Catch the podcast.
YouTube.
Give us a download. Go to YouTube. The Hurrdat Sports YouTube page. All right. That'll do it for Coffee and Cream.